We are.
This meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. Thank you to everybody that is here and present. Thank you to everybody that is watching us from afar. My name is Dale Cook. I'm the mayor of Dewey Beach, and we're about to start the town meeting. Excuse me. I will call a roll, and if you will stay here as we do that. Commissioner Moskowitz,
Commissioner David Moskowitz.
Commissioner Persinger,
Commissioner Gary Persinger.
Commissioner Bauer,
Present.
Commissioner Jazinski,
Present.
Town Manager. Oh, you're muted.
Present.
Town Attorney.
I'm here.
Thank you very much all for showing up. Again, I appreciated it. Appreciate you being able to take your time for this town meeting. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Indivisible,
liberty.
and justice for all.
Thank you. Start our meeting. Do I hear a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
Motion to adopt the amended agenda allowing public comment during each item.
I would ask that you introduce yourself each time before you speak so that we can have it on the record. That was Commissioner Moskowitz.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Commissioner Persinger seconds that.
Do you want to repeat the amendment? I mean, excuse me, repeat the motion, Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yes, Commissioner Moskowitz, motion to adopt the agenda allowing public comment during each item.
All right, thank you. And there was a second by Commissioner Persinger, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Commissioner Persinger. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Are there any nays? Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, it's unanimous. I guess we should go. I would like to go. I'll go right across the board as I have you on my screen for if you all have any personal updates. Commissioner Moskowitz, do you have a personal update on anything? Announcement or update?
No personal update.
Okay, Commissioner Persinger,
Commissioner Persinger has no updates.
Commissioner Bauer,
None at this time.
Commissioner Jazinski,
I have no updates.
Town Manager.
Nothing now.
I'd like to, just after we're going to go to public comments very quickly, and then I'm going to ask the town attorney to explain a couple things as we go along here. So we'll go to is there anybody that has any public comment present?
There are two people in the waiting room. I'm going to bring both of them in to see who they are from the public.
Yeah, and I would like to remind them that it's a 3-minute maximum, and they give their name and how they're related to the town, whether they're a homeowner, et cetera. Go ahead, Ashley. The town manager wanted to make a comment just as you were starting to make a comment also.
It looks like
Town
a
manager.
picture.
I talked without being recognized.
Is that the delay, Ashley?
Yeah, it looks, I muted. Let me see.
You just doing the first year out of less though.
Dennis.
I don't want to say it's the same money because it's not. It has the same overall impact to the total expenditure.
Turn the audio off of what you're listening to. If you'd like to
Okay.
for public comment.
Regarding taser replacement.
Turn it off.
And
Turn the audio off.
Oh, not that audio.
Okay, Ashley, if you want to introduce them.
If you can turn your YouTube off.
Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, we have the lease of,
Mouse.
Who's ever on the line, please turn their background, YouTube, et cetera, off, voice off.
I mean, so I don't really would, I'm not inclined to amend the motion.
If you want an answer to that question, you ask.
No, I mean, I don't understand the logic of why we wouldn't use
Doing that.
the money that we
Wait,
set
wait, wait. The person on the line has not turned their volume off.
refresh everybody's memory. Not long ago, we were talking about, we need to
Yeah.
upgrade
Let's see.
Mr. Trencher? Ashley, is that Mr. Trencher that's on the line?
It was.
It was.
Yeah, I think he was listening to the YouTube from the previous meeting, so maybe to just let him know if there's a way that's what I think the confusion was.
Thank you, Commissioner Moskowitz. I see that Mr. Grossman is on the line. Ashley, do you have anybody else besides Mr. Grossman?
There is a Dawn Becker and someone named Josh.
Okay, then we'll go to Mr. Grossman. If you'll start, give your name and where you're from, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I've got nothing to say. I'm just watching.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay.
Ms. Becker, do you have anything?
Yes, my name is Dawn Becker. I own 101 The Cove on Van Dyke Street. My husband's here as well, Ken Alwarden, but he's running in and out, packing up the car. The purpose for me being here is I have some concerns about the dogs not being permitted on the beach. I have some concerns about the number of events and the parking for events. Our street cannot tolerate any more parking. On a weekend night, it's just horrific. So those are my concerns, and I had some thoughts on them, and you can let me know when I can offer them.
Well, now, would you like to offer them now or during that specific item?
I can do, let me do it now because I might have to take off the call. My thought process on the dog.
Okay, I just want to remind you that you have 3 minutes. You're through 1 minute already. Go right ahead.
Okay, my thought process on the dogs. You said that you're going to have a lifeguard there. Is that correct?
That's not necessarily so.
Okay, well, if there is a lifeguard there, that lifeguard would be able to monitor for the dogs. I think that most of our dog owners are responsible, and I think that that's a nice place for them to take their dogs, given that we don't have very much green space. As far as the number of events, I think a calendar needs to be put out to the public so we all know what is going on when. And I don't have a solution for the parking. Thank you.
Ms. Becker, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. And I hope you'll stay on the line and listen to the whole meeting, although it might get boring for you. Thank you. Josh, if you'll come on. Josh, are you there?
Doesn't look like he has his audio hooked up.
Okay,
We can
then
try-
we'll move on to Virginia Rodino. It looks like that audio is cut off. Oh, there we go.
Hi there. I'm calling as a member of the Cove Board, and there were just some group questions about restricting the dog walking during the times when they had normally been allowed on the Bay Beach.
Yes, ma'am.
As well as questions about the public use during private events like weddings and so on. So those were
This is the time for you to make comments, and it's not necessarily, it's not considered a question and answer period, but go ahead and make your comments. You've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, just, I mean, folks would like to be able to keep the rules as they are because of the lack of green space in our community. And so being able to walk dogs as we had been and not be restricted is important to the Cove owners. And then certainly figuring out ways to not interrupt private events, but to still have use of those spaces in respectful ways would be important as well. That's it.
That's it. Well, you went for a minute. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Do you have any other comments that you'd like to make in general?
Nope.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ashley, is there anybody else on the line to make public comments?
This time.
Okay. At this time, will any of the other commissioners or the town manager or the town attorney that would like to make a comment at this time? Hearing none, I'll move on then. The action item and discussion item number 1, discuss budget and staffing revisions based on various scenarios reflecting the impact of COVID-19. I'll ask the town manager, Scott Koenig, to start this comment off.
Thank you, Mayor. I think everyone has received the latest working copy of the expected impacts or scenario impacts for COVID-19 that's been sent out. This spreadsheet really kind of changes daily as we update revenues and receive new information. But a lot of the general premise has remained the same. We're still, I think, looking at roughly $1 million in revenue loss from what we originally anticipated. That was the number that was communicated to the League of Local Governments when they asked us what our expected revenue shortfall was. I sent them a number and a copy of this spreadsheet indicating between $750,000 and $1 million of total revenue that we think is expected to be lost based on our current understanding. As far as the revenue streams, transfer tax has been strong. Building permits have been strong. So far this month, we're right now in total about 30% of our seasonal parking permits, which I think is probably in the neighborhood of about 600 permits that have been secured right now. That's both property owners and eventual visitors that have secured permits. So the areas of big question mark right now remain daily parking, the accommodations tax, rental licenses, things like that. We will begin following up with business licensing probably as early as next week as businesses begin to additional activity. Since the governor is opening the beaches, we will have our beach concession vendor out there. So that revenue had been marked at 0 previously. The expectation is as long as the beach remains open that they would honor that contract of roughly $70,000 that we're expecting to receive from them. So by the governor opening the beaches at 5 p.m. today, that's within their window, and they will begin their activity on the beach today. As I said, we've started enforcement of parking. There was tickets written yesterday. There's tickets being written today. There'll be staff in over the weekend. Though the schedule is not full with the expected number of people, we do have people out doing that activity. With respect to expenses, the red expenses on the bottom are the ones that we are at this point pretty definitive on. Commissioner Jasinski had asked a question about, roughly how much of a savings do we have in staff since April 1 through now versus last year? And if you did the roll up of the numbers, we have about $14,000 of payroll savings year over year between April 1 to I think it was May 5th was the cutoff date. So that's a positive thing. The flip side to that is that we have been incurring expenses related to fogging the building as part of protective measures against a virus spread. Now, those expenses are likely to be reimbursable once we get to a reimbursement request either through DEMA or through one of the other stimulus grants. But that's an expense that's out there that we had not anticipated, that we're incurring just as a protective measure. When we look at what are the kind of the staffing levels that we're talking about, for parking, we're probably at about 30% of the staff that we were anticipating hiring. And depending on how the next week or so goes with activity, we may ramp some of that hiring up if necessary. The seasonals, we do have 16 seasonals that have been hired. They are working in altered shifts. They're not all here at one time to reduce staff contact. And their deployment will also depend on the number of people that are in town and at the various times.
That's police seasonals?
The police seasonals, yes. Lifeguards, we have a full complement of lifeguards. Their hours will again be dependent upon weather and number of people on the beach, and whether we're actually able to allow people in the water based on kind of the weather conditions and stuff like that. So that's where those things are standing right now. We're still trying to get information from the governor's office about the vacation and leisure rental prohibition right now, when that is expected to come off, and how that may affect things going forward. And we have received a number of kind of promotional items from the state to continue the messaging regarding social distancing and kind of the expectations of people visiting the beach. That's a marketing campaign that we're helping distribute stuff, and the state is providing to us. So,
Town manager, could you please do a short dissertation, if you wish, on what is reimbursable versus non-reimbursable expenses, or what will likely be reimbursable versus non-reimbursable?
Yep. So things that we believe are going to be reimbursable are cleaning measures, cleaning supplies that we would not have normally had to purchase, any type of PPE supplies that would not normally be necessary for normal operations. We think some of this Zoom conferencing expenses may be reimbursable. So anything that we have done to modify operations to function based on the impact of COVID-19, we think will be within the definition of a reimbursable. And we have begun, collecting data, collecting invoices, information, and trying to put them into a spreadsheet on what the expected reimbursement costs are. As far as staff time, there's probably not a lot of staff time that's reimbursable related to that, because most of our staff time we've tried to manage within a normal work week, and haven't incurred a substantial, in fact, we haven't incurred very much overtime at all the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks.
Any other comments on that, town manager?
No.
Before I go to the commissioners? All right, I'm going to again go across the line here as I see you on my screen, and ask for your comments and questions that you might ask the town manager. And this is to the commissioners, and then I will go to any public at large that want to have any comments on this one particular topic. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, I just have a few comments. With the lifeguard on the bay, we're in very bad budget times, and that hasn't been a lifeguard in the bay in the past. And I just don't think at this point one is necessary based on the past and the current budget predicament. I think we're in very bad times, and it'd be wasteful spending. I think we should have some sort of official policy on lifeguards, so if a lifeguard comes for duty or is ready for duty, but we don't need them because of bad weather or the lifeguard patrol anticipates low attendance, we pay them for a certain amount of hours, like 2 or 3. I think there's been an unofficial policy in the past, and we should just have a formal policy to be fair to both parties. I think as terms of revenue, dog license checker on the beach is one source of revenue. Someone to tell people to do permits and then have Park Mobile so they can buy a dog license, and also have some rental, once rentals are allowed, to actually enforce. And as we found out 2 weeks ago, someone was operating a group home without a rental license. And then we need to be fair to the people who are not paying into the system. And then my only other comment, which is a budget matter, is the roof on the life-saving station needs to be repaired. So that's probably, I'm not sure if it's included in this, but it's probably a future expense we need to consider as well.
Town manager, did you want to address any of that?
Well, I think the lifeguard discussion for the Bay Beach is more appropriate when we get to the beach rules and stuff like that. I agree the lifeguard station's roof more likely doesn't need repair, it needs replacement, which is a substantial cost. So we're trying to develop some cost scenarios for that. And we'll be back to the commissioners at some point here shortly, probably June or July, for a proposal to do something at the life-saving station.
All right, Commissioner Bauer, do you have comments or suggestions or questions?
No, I do, and it's geared towards Scott. Has anybody made any recommendations for cuts in writing?
I'd have to go back and look at individual emails. A lot of the discussion has been, can you modify schedules, and what might be the impact of that? So I'd have to pull different emails up. The kind of the bottom area of this spreadsheet, we're it's somewhat caught between a rock and a hard place. We've got to be prepared for crowds coming in, and so we have to have staff on standby. So we had to hire, the lifeguards, and we had to hire the seasonal police. I think the expectation is, while we may not need them the first couple weeks of summer, as the restrictions are lifted and more people are coming into town, we'll need those staff deployed. But as we've said a couple of times, there's not a terrible amount of discretionary spending in our budget. We don't have a large capital program that we could cut back things on. We had some capital purchases that were approved last year, such as the police van purchase that still has to happen. We've got equipment that was purchased or authorized last year related to the recording of the police lines, that as soon as there's allowable interstate travel for that installation, that equipment is supposed to go in. So there have been some specific things that commissioners have suggested, but those may not be reflected individually on the spreadsheet as of today.
Commissioner Bauer,
I think I heard Scott say that we're going to be short $1 million. Is that correct?
Commissioner Bauer, before you go on any further, I just want to, so that everybody knows, I sent in proposed cuts of staffing. I sent in proposed, if you would, ideas about saving expenses on the beach and saving expenses for code enforcement.
Right.
And about the possibility of merging departments. So I just wanted you to know that. Go ahead, Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, and thank you, Dale, for doing that. I mean, I did as well. Did all commissioners send in recommendations for cuts?
I think I've received emails from just about everybody with respect to revenues and expenditures.
All right, can we go on record of what we're in favor of cutting? If you've received the emails, that's public information.
Yeah, I don't have, like I said, I didn't bring a list of cuts today for this meeting, mainly because I think some of the cuts are dependent upon what actually happens with opening of the beach. So the fact that
I believe you when you say you're sincerely, you think we're $1 million short. So that tells me that we need to cut,
That's
right?
correct.
Unless the rest of us are in favor of not having a $1 million shortfall this year.
I think, again, we're expecting as much as $1 million less of revenue. And we will not be able to cut our way out of $1 million hole. That
Right.
$1 million assumes that the commissioners will support using some of the general fund balance or reserves if that is absolutely necessary. However, today it's very hard to tag these things because the governor has authorized the opening of the beach. So we have to guard the beach to a certain extent. And as we start to see those costs versus activity, we may be able to scale back on some things. But as I said before, I don't think we can cut our way. We can't cut $1 million of expenses out unless we say we're not going to guard the beach or we're going to lay off staff or things like that. And those things have not reached the commissioner level yet.
Commissioner Bauer, just so you know, I just wanted everyone to know we have not and are not right now discussing cutting guards or police in town of Dewey Beach. Just want to get that up front so far.
Well, I think we've all made recommendations. So, I mean, there's two avenues we're going to go down here. That we're short $1 million. And let me just say that again, it's $1 million. It's not 100,000. It's not 200. It's $1 million. And I just have to ask my fellow commissioners if they agree with that. Then we're going to have to sit here and make some hard decisions and go on record of making those hard decisions.
I agree. Are you finished now, Commissioner Bauer?
I am now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I mean, like others, I've suggested some cuts. I can see some of those reflected in the spreadsheet that the town manager provided for us today. There are probably some others that I've suggested that maybe haven't been adopted that we may still want to cut back on. But the basic problem, I think, as the town manager says, is you quickly get down to an issue of staffing. This is very much a people-based expenditure budget, and thus far we have not talked about reducing levels of staffing. The only place where I thought we might have some additional flexibility perhaps would be in the seasonal police force. But again, you get caught in an awkward situation because you have to be prepared for something that approaches a more normal season beginning sometime in July and August. But you don't want to overspend now when the activity level in town is not what it normally would be at this time of year, certainly not on a Memorial Day weekend. All that said, I think one of the things that I have been recommending for a couple of meetings now is that we make use of the funds from auctioning the Lesso equipment. We have obligated some of those funds already, I believe, for recording the non-emergency police lines, as well as we just authorized spending from those funds at the last meeting for the first year of payments for the new tasers that we authorized at the last meeting. I would very much like to see us authorize that money is now sitting in the general fund balance, I believe. I would like to see us authorize the use of the remaining funds to pay for police expenditures for this summer, especially the seasonal police. And if there's money left over, I doubt that there would be. If there would be money left over, we would use that for the police operating budget. I think that's good use of the money. We had all agreed that we would use those auction funds for police purposes, and I think this is a time where we have a specific need and we can make a good use of those funds. So that's one comment. I just had a question for the town manager, and that is there any level of job sharing, I guess, at this point? I guess I'm thinking primarily about seasonal police and code enforcement, where we can save some money. I think we've talked about this a little bit. It may save a little money, save a few staff people by employing people and doing some of the parking code enforcement, where we would normally have a separate staff devoted to doing that.
Yep. So again, right now we have brought on 3 returning people in code enforcement for parking ticket writing, and we're starting to see the level of cars in town come up. The expectation I have is that we will train some of the seasonals to offset expenditures that normally would have been in the code enforcement section to help with writing of tickets, especially on the off hours of things with, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like we may use them on day shifts versus have them writing tickets at night, where we may have to have them support police operations more heavily. So those things will likely start occurring next week. We need to get through the holiday weekend and start ramping up for how do we, what's really happening on the ground as we see people coming into town. While we still have the rental, the vacation and leisure ban, the expectation is there's going to be fewer cars. But if that ban gets lifted, we think there's going to be an impact of additional cars coming to town, where we would need more people writing tickets, more people doing other activities as the volume of people go up. So there is an expectation and that there will be manpower sharing in that area as we go forward through the summer.
And as in the past, Commissioner Barrow, I'll get back to you, but I need to go through all the commissioners first with their comments. So, excuse me, Commissioner Jazinski.
Thank you, Dale.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna hold up for 1 second, Commissioner. Commissioner Persinger, are you finished?
I am finished, yes.
Sorry, I didn't ask you first. Now, Commissioner Jazinski.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So Scott, I kind of sent you an email kind of letting you know that I was going to want to talk a little bit about this. And that's really about kind of run rates and how much we can expect to be able to save, like what's the most we could save based on the status we're in. So today we're in a status with the beach open, but no public accommodations, whether it's a single family rental home, second homeowners are supposed to be quarantined for 2 weeks, and hotels are closed. So with that few people out and about, and we look at the needs around what I will call the variable staffing departments, code enforcement, seasonal police, and lifeguards, what kind of run rate can we achieve maximum in the current status right now, savings across those departments on a weekly basis? Because the situation's fluid.
A dollar amount by week, I'd have to go back and do some calculation. But again, let's use code enforcement as an example. I think we typically had, I would say, between 6 and 10 code enforcement officers in beginning Memorial Day weekend. We're at 3 right now. So for those hours, we're probably at about a 60% savings right now. I'd have to do a run report to figure out how, what the real impact of that is, but we're at about 60%. In the budget, our original budget had 20 seasonal officers. We're at 16 maximum right now, and I think their hours will probably fluctuate based on the numbers. So that run rate, that's roughly a 25% savings, probably more in the neighborhood of 30 at the moment. As far as lifeguards, that one, there's probably less savings than the others, in the sense that we've hired a full complement of lifeguards. Now, for example, the weather and stuff will modify shifts. If we don't end up lifeguarding the Bay Beach, that will save some money. But I would say lifeguarding is probably, we're in probably the 5 to 10% reduction right now. Only because we're just starting the season and we don't know how many people are going to be out on the beach yet. And we don't have a full day of of authorization on the beach yet.
So right now, in the current state, I mean, there's just very little tourism in town, right? I mean, we're almost kind of at a level where, you know, before you've even brought on the seasonal people, just a normal spring weekend when, you know, there's just kind of a few people down. So given the situation, I'm a little bit surprised that, for instance, right now we need a full complement of lifeguards when it's more just like, you know, what we'd have, you know, in the middle of September, and in fact, candidly, probably even less than we'd have in the middle of September. So why maintain that level of staffing? I'm just trying to understand.
Well, say for example, if the weather was going to be sunny and 80 degrees this weekend versus kind of cloudy and 60, we would expect several thousand people on the beach, even under the current conditions. And I think that would be reasonable to expect. So we don't have I don't have any good data right now to say we should pull back on the number of lifeguards that's out there, except for the fact that the beach hasn't opened yet. So the beach really isn't open until 5 o'clock today for anything other than walking and exercising. So there are a lot more people in town now than there were a week ago. There's people out running. There's a lot of joggers, a lot of walkers. I have not been up on the beach today, but there is a significant increase in activity, irregardless of whether the rentals are being allowed or not. There are many out-of-state tags coming into the area, whether they're actually property owners or visitors. The volume of traffic has increased substantially. So I think we'll have a better feel for some of this stuff after this weekend, and we see how many people are actually visiting the area, whether, you know, the feeling coming back is these are people that are here for the summer versus not here for the summer. But we had to secure our lifeguards so that we could, you know, we essentially have to, at this point, assume that we're going to have a full beach, I think, since the beach is opening.
I mean, respectfully, if people aren't allowed to rent and people are quarantined and the hotels are closed, I can't see how we will have the same kind of crowd on the beach. I just don't see how we could have that many people if in the current status of so much of the tourism being a forced shutdown. I get my other question would really be more to the rest of the commissioners who've been here a little bit longer. I'm kind of trying to understand at the end of this discussion what we're going to try to do. Paul had mentioned, you know, deciding on a cutback figure, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, are we going to try to end this discussion and say, okay, we have to pick a total budgetary figure in terms of cutbacks from the original proposed budget, or are we just going to kind of continue to take it week by week and hope that we can cut spending? And it's really kind of an open-ended question in that regard.
Commissioner, are you finished what you're saying?
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's now my turn, and I have in line after me, I have Commissioner Bauer, Commissioner Pritzker, and Commissioner Moskowitz that have raised their hand in that order. So I'll speak first. I'm standing behind what Commissioner Bauer and Commissioner Jasinski have said. Commissioner Bauer, I think they said it for two different reasons, but two things. I think we have to stand up and say what we want to cut. Because we have to cut something. We can't just spend all of every dime we have. We have to cut something back, and we have to say to our town manager and to the public what we're willing to cut personally. And Commissioner Jasinski, I think, was correct in saying that we're not getting the crowds, or we don't feel we're going to be having the crowds right now, as long as the governor's declarations are in effect. And I think we have to make clear to our department heads they have to cut back. I think somehow, somewhere, some way, we have to say to the department heads, we have to restaff in a way. And if that takes not having as many seasonal police out on during the week, or not having as many guards on the beach and having the guarded beach in one area and another unguarded beach in another area, so be it. We have to hold back the cost right now. So that's my comments. I'm now going to go to Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, Commissioner Persinger had mentioned about using the LESO funds to sort of balance this budget. Ashley, can you go back to our, I believe it was either our October or November meeting of 2019? What did we go on record of saying the LESO funds were going to be used for? If we can just make
That
that.
would take quite a while,
Well, I mean, we discussed this at length, and, I understand the concept of doing it, but I also understand that our police have received a great amount of criticism for not being upgraded. Commissioner Moskowitz has gone on record of criticizing them at a number of times, and Commissioner Persinger, and I think we all have. But we need to upgrade our police department, and all of a sudden, we're going to use the money, the one-time event that we were going to set aside for, in my understanding of it, and Ashley, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to use the money that we set aside to upgrade them to use it for balancing our budget. I think that's wrong. That's all I have to say, Bill.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bauer. Commissioner Persinger, you might want to answer the question, and then also you had your hand up to make a statement anyway.
Well, yeah, I did. Regarding the LESO funds, Commissioner Bauer and I just have a different recollection. I don't recall agreeing to use that money only for upgrading the police, but rather to use it for police expenses. And I know in some of the discussions, we'd even talked about the possibility of using it for police operating costs. That said, even if there was some understanding in the past that we would use this only for upgrading the police department, I would recommend that we revisit that decision. We're in a huge budget crisis. We have the potential for at least $1 million shortfall here. There's a ready source of money that we could use to apply to that. And I think using it for police expenses is something that I would like to revisit if in fact we need to do that, if that doing so would be counter to what we had agreed to in the past. So that's my position, and we can talk about that and resolve that at some point. The other comments that I raised my hand about is, it's difficult for commissioners to think through what the issues are and what the potential is for better use of staff, using staff in a more efficient way. I mean, I would tend to agree that we're very likely to see a much smaller crowd of people in town for Memorial Day because of the rental ban, because the restaurants are open still only for carry-out operations. So there will be fewer people. I don't think you can tell very much from Friday. My recollection over many, many Fridays before Memorial Day is that it's very much the calm before the storm, and that people begin to really stream into town, sometime late Friday and even into early Saturday. We do have a rental ban. We do have the restriction on out-of-state people. I expect that there are going to be a whole lot of people who don't respect that, and they come to town anyway. They're going to be on the beach. So, we're not going to be asking people for IDs and, trying to restrict their use of the beach or their access to the beach. But I think we need to come up with some ideas about the best way to make the maximum use of our staff. The lifeguards are the ones that come to mind, first of all. I know the beach patrol captain was quoted in the press as saying that, he had a full complement of lifeguards, and he intended to have a lifeguard at each street for Memorial Day. I don't know if that's a good decision. I wonder if that isn't something that could be revisited so that we would have a lifeguard station at every other street, recognizing that we will have reduced crowds. I don't know what our obligations are. We have a full complement of lifeguards, but what's our obligation as a town, as an employer to them? Can we keep our staffing very flexible so that we're really using these lifeguards only on an as-needed basis? That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to go now to in line Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, so Commissioner Persinger and I updated the town manager's LESO guidelines back in October of 2018. The mayor Cook at that meeting, you were actually absent because you had an out of town function. From what we approved unanimously, 4-0 at that meeting, it said with the town manager's approval, these funds may be used to purchase necessary Dewey Beach Police Department equipment or supplies. Use of these funds to support Dewey Beach Police Department operations provided for in the town's operating budget will require that the police department operating budget be reduced by the amount of funds used. So Commissioner Persinger's recollection of that is correct, but that's taking us off topic because I mean, Commissioners Bauer and Commissioner Jaginski's original point is how much are we looking to cut versus how much are we looking to use for savings? And I mean, all throughout, we have various savings, different programs that we save like X amount of building permits and stuff for the rainy day, and it's a rainy day. And I mean, I think we at this point have to be comfortable using a good 500 to 700,000 in savings, because I really believe that it's 1 to 1.5 million deficit, not just 1 million. And I think people expect, as we saw last weekend, people expect some sort of service in the town. And last weekend was beautiful weather, and you had 3 lifeguards on the beach, and the beach was being like they were at capacity handling things. You do need lifeguards. But that said, we can have a peak and off-peak program. You need lifeguards more on weekends than during a week. So, I mean, my suggestions for cost cutting are no lifeguard on the bay during the week of June, to have reduced lifeguard stations. So maybe close a station or two and push people to the other stations for lifeguards. And seasonal police to add code enforcement duties. And is at the time where everyone has to be cross-functional in order for this town to survive, like we're all in it. And I mean, those would be the 3 suggestions, but as the town manager has said, I don't think we have much room to cut. That's the problem. We have a lot of employees who we depend on. People depend on the police. People depend on lifeguards, and we have some room, but not a lot of room to cut.
Commissioner, since you're up right now, then I'll ask the same question of the other people. I mentioned earlier the specific items that I mentioned that would save cost for the town. Would you like to now say, Commissioner Moskowitz, what items that you had suggested to the town manager that you cut cost?
Yeah, well, I'll read the email I had sent the town manager. I said, and it was consistent with what I've been saying all along. It's have seasonal police give tickets and cross-train under code enforcement. I mean, as the town manager said, that's 6 people we are saving, and seasonal police can give some tickets and it helps out. Enforce dog licenses on the beach and any non-dog cleanup. That's, I believe, a huge revenue source that we're not realizing right now. Last weekend, there was people on the beach and they had their dog and they didn't realize that dog licenses were required. And I told them, like, look, someone's going to be giving tickets next week. You should go to town hall. So I believe that is a key. Reduce seasonal workforce schedules, especially during midweek June. EX have some lifeguard area closed during the week. I also asked to sell seasonal parking passes and dog licenses online. One additional thing is people believe, TJ had mentioned, people like getting parking permits as a donation to the town. Maybe the town can have some sort of donation program. I know Lewis has a police foundation, and perhaps Dewey could have some sort of foundation to try to get donations. My other 3 points on my list to the town manager was sell dog licenses on Park Mobile, monitor rental listings, and apply for grants. I mean, we can only cut so much, but applying for grants right now, there's a lot of police grants. If we could get 1 or 2, every little bit helps. And the way I see, when I say get the 600 grand from savings, potentially, like that money has to come from all savings, including what Commissioner Persinger said, like there can be no restricted money. We need to look at everything through a huge capital budget, but at the same time, we may have to spend on things like a roof to replace. It's just life. But I so far, I mean, from this conversation, I think we do have consensus about like where we can cut and what we can cut. And I just like to ask the town manager, because I know we're going back and forth, is there any additional cuts he can envision?
Well, wait, Commissioner Moskowitz, I'm going to ask the same question of all the commissioners and get their answers first before we go back to the town manager. Good.
Okay, but just to sum it up, everything you have said, I have agreed with.
All right, Commissioner Bauer, what items did you send to the town manager for suggested cuts and expenses? Your sound is off.
Sorry about that. No, my recommendations have been the number of hours that lifeguards are going to be employed for. So I think our first cut is, or not a cut, but how we, we're going to use whatever surplus, the rainy day money that we have. Let's use that up first, and then apply cuts to lifeguard, seasonal, et cetera, based on number of hours, not based on number of people.
Is that it, sir?
That's it.
Okay, Commissioner Persinger, I'll ask the same question of you. What had you suggested to the town manager that would cut cost in town?
I'll just read my list. First of all, eliminate or reduce commissioner and committee expenses to bare minimum. Forgo any scat dinners and rely on telephone and email for scat. That's the Southern Sussex County Association of Towns. Eliminate donations, including the fire department, or at least cut it by half. Eliminate or reduce lawsuit fees with no pending litigation and potentially some reduced risk because of less intense summer season. Rely on reserves if needed. Eliminate all overtime. Reconsider hiring a summer intern. Rely on email and administrative effort to collect accommodations taxes with a shorter and less intensive rental season. Benefit cost ratio for a summer intern is lower. Eliminate special events. Spending occurs in spring and summer. Why not eliminate? Need more specific plans for reducing police, especially seasonal, code enforcement, and beach patrol expenses, including potential for sharing or covering responsibilities, and then using less of funds to support seasonal police requirements. And I just want to remind everyone that, based on what we have approved in the last couple of meetings with respect to rainy day funds and reserves and that sort of thing, we have consolidated everything basically into to two accounts. First of all being the general fund. And we do have a policy for maintaining a minimum balance in the general fund. As part of that general fund, there is the remainder of the LESO funds. I think the general fund balance, I heard the town manager say, I believe yesterday, it's somewhere around $1.1, $1.2 million. And then we have something around $1.1, $1.2 million that is in short-term cash equivalent investments with Brown Advisory. So that really represents the sum total of our reserves that we could draw upon to meet the budget deficit that we're looking at.
Thank you, Commissioner Persinger. Commissioner Jasinski, I had already given my thoughts on the cuts, and so I'm going to go to you. I know you're new in the group, but I know you have some specific items that you might suggest.
Yeah, so I think this is all, a lot of these ideas are great, and they're common sense, and they make sense to do. And from my perspective on this, I think this is the third meeting, might be the second, but I think it's the third, where there's been kind of a dive into the budget and what are we going to do. And we kind of have these base cases, and we have what I'd call kind of a goodwill effort to try to cut expenses, but no real hard numbers. Like, we talk about the lifeguards, but we don't really talk about hard numbers. And as commissioners, I don't feel that we're in a position to be dynamic enough to know that I need 10 lifeguards today versus I only need 2 people going up and down the beach because the weather stinks and no one's in town, right? That's too dynamic, and that's really a responsibility from my perspective of the town's full-time leadership to make those determinations. So I'm going to kind of give you guys an idea, and I'm not going to put it as a motion because I think we just want to discuss it, and then we can kind of say if we want to actually make some kind of resolution later. But my proposal is still going to leave us certainly with a large deficit this year, but it's going to put a little bit of where the rubber meets the road. And what I'm proposing is that the town manager to implement $426,000 of cost savings in expenses. Today, we're looking at most likely between 745 and 1.5 million in reduced revenues. So that only is going to partially close our gap in terms of what we're thinking of that. However, we are not going to dictate how he achieves that. If he feels that he needs to do a little less cutting on the lifeguards and a little more here, that's his discretion. That's kind of what we have him hired for. And we make the provision that we will immediately revisit that if the lodging and second homeowners are both allowed to return to town, which of course is going to drive more revenue. We can revisit this. But I believe we need to put a stake in the ground that candidly still leaves us with a large deficit, but it does require some substantial cuts. If current course and speed, we'll spend almost our entire reserve that we spent a decade building up in 1 year, which I, as a commissioner, I just don't think it's responsible for us to go down that path.
Okay, I'm going to go one more round here. We got Commissioner Moskowitz and Commissioner Bauer that have their hands up. Commissioner Moskowitz, please.
Yeah, I agree with what Commissioner Dudzinski had said, and I'll keep it short and sweet. I just agree.
Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, we're having a discussion here. There's a responsibility by all of us to have public safety, which is police and lifeguards. That's what our town's about, right? So the first person that drowns, or the first person that, there's a crime committed and we can't respond to it, would you rather have used the rainy day funds? Because I can't think of a better rainy day than we're having right now. I mean, this is the definition of what a rainy day is. But I agree, we've used it for 10 years, but and we have to get a consensus on this. Are we going to jeopardize public safety or use rainy day? I mean, you can't have it both ways. I mean, you have to pick a side. I mean, take whichever side you want, but got to go on record for it.
Commissioner Bauer, are you finished?
I am done.
I just want to say again, and I've mentioned this to you once before in a town meeting, that is not the decision we have to make. I don't believe it's either lack of safety or pay bills. I think we have to cut back and spend some of the reserve funds. And I think we can do that safely. And I think we would not ever go against the recommendations of the valid recommendations of the police chief or the captain of the guard. But I don't think that's a valid analogy to say that we have either safety or spend money. I think it's.
Can I make one comment? It's $1 million.
Yes,
so try to come up with $1 million somehow. I mean, let's be sincere about it. Are we trying to cut or are we not trying to cut?
Yeah, but we're not trying to cut $1 million. All
right.
Okay, so I had Commissioner Dudzinski's hand up, Commissioner Moskowitz, and Commissioner Persinger in that order.
Okay.
Commissioner Dudzinski.
I was just going to make the same point you made, Dale, that I don't believe it is a choice that if we cut, we're cutting public safety. We can balance both objectives of to be fiscally responsible and still run a substantial deficit this year while also providing public safety, basically, as you said.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
As you said as well. And just to remind everyone, this is a multi-year deficit likely, because we don't know what's going to happen with COVID-19 in the economy. So that's why we can't just spend all the money this year, because we need some money for potentially the next few years.
Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I mean, whatever we do today, we're not going to be able to cut $1 million out of the budget. We're still going to be left with a deficit of some level. And that's why the first question at the bottom of the spreadsheet that the town managers provided for us is, how much of those reserve funds are we willing to spend on this? And we still need to come to some determination. We're going to have to spend some to clear up the deficit using just reserve funds. I think would be a very unwise decision. It would put us in jeopardy for future budgets. So, we're talking about using some of it, but how much? I don't think it's going to be a question of sacrificing public safety. If there are some cuts that are proposed and the beach patrol captain and the police chief comes to the town manager, who then comes to us and says, well, you can't do that because you're going to sacrifice public safety. I think, we're going to sit down and take a hard look at that. And I suspect that we're going to support either the beach patrol captain or the police chief, whoever's making that statement. I guess the question I have, I think Commissioner Jasinski mentioned a specific figure. Was it $426,000?
Correct.
Did I hear that? And how did you arrive at that figure?
I looked.
Go ahead.
Is it okay, since he was addressing me? I thought it was okay to respond. I looked at basically what he did across columns 1 and column 2. And I think it's somewhat of a hybrid. I think there are things that he can do to reduce staffing. We have beautiful days in the off season when there's no seasonal staff at all. We have beautiful days where there's no seasonal staff, and yet we still maintain town services and essential type services. So I know that it's possible, while this town is shut down, for us to serve the public, okay, without a significant amount of part-time staff while we're basically shut down from providing hotel and rental housing.
I want to go just.
Could I just finish?
No, I want to go just one short time here. Number one, Ms. Hudson, were you able to pick up you were questioned about what the final motion was? Did you, by Commissioner Bauer, did you ever find that motion on the expenditure of police funds?
I was able to find the policy and guidelines on the website, and under disposing of items and accounting, it says funds from the disposal of property will be deposited to the Dewey Beach Police Department restricted account or other appropriate town account as required by state or local law. With the town manager's approval, these funds may be used to purchase necessary equipment or supplies. Use of these funds to support Dewey Beach Police Department operations provided for in the town's operating budget will require that the police department operating budget be reduced by the amount of funds used.
Thank you very much. Town Manager Koenig, we've talked a lot here. We've spoken a lot about you should be able to do this, you should be able to do that. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, but unfortunately, you're the guy that runs the day-to-day operation, and you can get the general consensus. The general consensus is that we need to cut back on expenditure of funds while also spending money to pay the bills, and spending from the reserve funds, et cetera. And I use those terms loosely because we have a lot of terms batted about, but it's in the general fund now. So I'd like to have your ideas on what you hear and what you think and what you think the commissioners want from you.
Well, to achieve $426,000 in cost savings, I think the only way that you're going to do that effectively is we're going to guard every other block of the beach. So there'll be we'll number the entrances. On Monday, it's an odd day. The odd numbers will have a guard. The even numbers won't have a guard. And that needs to be communicated out to everybody, because I will tell you, there are going to be complaints about that because it will alternate. And the only fair way to do it is to alternate it, because I don't think I can effectively say there's less traffic on this street and we're always going to guard the other street. So there would have to be some kind of an alternate schedule put up that every other block is guarded. That could probably get us to the $426,000 in savings. I cannot achieve that number. I will tell you, the dog licensing revenue, by trying to chase it on the beach, it won't get there. It'll be a net loss or a break even. It won't achieve a substantial positive.
Somebody's dog is barking at you about that.
We won't be having extra police on duty during the daytime on the weekends, because that will be necessary to achieve those costs. So that number is going to put probably conflict between several people's goals on levels of service. I'm not as, I'm more optimistic, I think, on revenues than other people are, because I believe that we're going to do better than the $1 million gap, based on what I see right now. But I have to, I have to deliver that. I can't, it's just what I believe is going to happen once the rental ban or the vacation ban is lifted. I think those numbers are going to rebound. Now, how much is it going to rebound? I don't know at the moment, but the revenues look a lot better today than they did 2 weeks ago. And so that's the basis for my statement. I can honestly say, if we want to use the LISO funds, and that's the direction of the commissioners, then what's going to happen is we're going to take all the expenses this month and start whittling down that roughly 175 number, and it will start showing up on our reports. We can do that now if that's what the commissioners want and feel that that's the appropriate step, or we could wait and start that clock in the month of June or the month of July. I kind of see the dollars as the same. They're all in the same pot for me. But I need some direction as to what the commissioners would like to see. Do you want to see that number begin whittling down with the end of May reports, or do you want it to begin going down with the June reports? And we already, I can tell you, probably have more complaints to deal with than we have staff to apply to those complaints, related to things that are happening right now. So if we're going to target that 426 number, then we're probably not going to hire any more code enforcement staff. We'll stick with the people that we have. We'll supplement that with our police, seasonals, and we'll do the best we can to achieve that 400,000+ in savings. But it will be noticeable, most likely on the beaches, to achieve that.
I appreciate that comment. I was going to go to Commissioner Persner, but he stepped away from his. Oh, there he is. I have on the list. I'm going to go to myself first, and then Commissioner Persinger, and then Commissioner Bauer, who had their hand up. I think two things. I think we should give some sort of direction about an amount of money to attempt it to be saved by the town manager. I think that we should the town manager has to run the day-to-day operation of the town. And I think if he tells us, I can't do that amount of money, then we should accept that. But we should demand or request that he make an honest effort to cut costs. The second thing is, I'd like to know, we mentioned from this before, we've never actually directed the town attorney to do this, and town attorney, you have your speaker off. If you turn your speaker on for a minute, your microphone, good. I'd like to ask you, do you have the ability to give us a direct answer of what we are required, so-called required by state or other authority to man the lifeguards on the beach?
I don't know that I can give you a direct answer, but I don't think you have any specific directive. I think you're obligated, probably in a memorandum of understanding somewhere, that you're going to protect the public, but what that means, it doesn't seem to interfere with the current practice, which is when the surf is rough, that the beach patrol captain can close the beaches. I don't think there's any, I think that the discretion is entirely his at the current time. And if your staffing is at, just for the sake of argument, at half levels, then the captain will be required to provide for the safety by closing certain of the beaches as opposed to those at the end of other streets. So I could do a minimal amount of research, but I think you've got the discretion that you need to consider these concepts.
I thank you for that, because I don't believe we've ever actually looked into it to find, we all quote about what we should do, what we legally have to do, et cetera, but I don't think that's ever been actually questioned and delved into, and I would appreciate if you would do that. My comment is what I think will back up that statement from the town attorney is that we go into various months and various times throughout the years. We've always had different staffing at different times of the year, different staffing for different amounts of people on the beach. And we've always relied on the captain of the guard to, excuse me, to determine the staffing that was for a safe level. And there have been times, many times, where the captain of the guard did not have full staffing or felt that he could do with less staffing and still have safety of the beach area that is being guarded, and then have signs up, et cetera, that certain areas of the beach are not guarded. So that is a possibility, but I think we should rely on the town manager and the captain of the guard to come up with that possibility. I think we should direct them to come up with that scenario and possibility of doing that. I'm now going to go to Commissioner Persinger and then Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, I would say first off, I'm perfectly comfortable with using $426,000 as a target figure. This is not an uncommon practice, I think, in doing budgeting. You look at your revenues, you look at your expenses, and where you're short, you go back to your department heads and you say, we have to save this much money. How are we going to do this? So I'm perfectly comfortable with turning to the town manager and asking him to go back to the department heads that come up with the best suggestions. I would, in terms of protecting public safety, I would throw into the pot for consideration by the police chief, the LESO funds, so that, if we need to save $426,000, and the police chief knows that there's those LESO funds out there, and if he believes that the only way not to sacrifice public safety is to draw on those funds, I think that would be, good input to have. And I think that gives him perhaps a bit more flexibility in thinking through how we take $426,000 out of this. Public safety has to be paramount, and we have to protect the town as well. So, if we can protect the public safety and guard every other street, and we talked to the beach patrol captain and he feels confident about that, then that's a viable way to go. If we can't do that and we need to close off sections of the beach and post signs out there that says, swim at your own risk, this beach is not guarded, and have other sections of the beach guarded, then we need to consider that as well. But again, turning to the town manager, asking him to look for ways to save that money, I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Thank you, Commissioner Persinger. Commissioner Bauer, you're next.
Yes, so we talked about, I think, an honest number of being $1 million short. So 426 leaves us a lot of money short, right?
Yes, sir.
So are we going to make this decision? Are we going to call a vote to say we're going to take the remainder of $1 million minus 426? Are we going to do that in a vote that we're going to take it out of the rainy day, or we're not?
No, we can't. I'm going to interrupt just for a second, and I apologize for that, but we can't do a vote right today. It was not listed as a vote, but it is understood that we would put on the agenda because you get the sense of the commissioners, and the town manager would begin to act on the sense of the commissioners. So go ahead, Mr. Bauer.
I'm trying to take the guidance from our town manager that says we're going to be $1 million short, but we're going to cut 426,000. That doesn't add up. So, and these are tough decisions. I mean, no one wants to go on record as saying, "Hey, I'm going to cut A, B, or C." I mean, are we going to make this decision? Or are we just going to talk about it? I mean, Mayor, I'd like you to call for a vote on this thing.
Well, I can't call for a vote. It wasn't listed as a voting item.
Right. Well, then we're not going to address it today. So it's a waste of time.
We are definitely going to address it today. And I have two hands up. I'll go to you next. We are definitely going to address it today, because today the town manager gets the sense of the commissioners. And I believe the sense of the commissioners is we need to cut, and we need to, excuse me, and we need to do.
We have to come up with a hard number, though.
Wait one second.
We're just throwing numbers around.
Wait 1 second. We're going to continue to throw numbers around throughout the entire summer. That's the only way we can do it. It's the only way we're going to be able to do it, because if it gets better, we're going to cut the number back. If it gets worse, we're going to say we've got to come up, either spend more out of the reserves or cut more, whichever is more logical, and whichever keeps the town safe. So Commissioner Jazinski and then Commissioner Moskowitz.
So I want to be clear about one thing. We only slightly control, and that's everybody in town staff and commissioners, revenue. We can influence a little, but we can't control revenue. All we can really control is expenses. So whatever action we take really has to be directed towards expenses, not so much the gap, just that based on what we know today and what we think, where we think revenues are going to come, what we need to do with expenses. I did have a question specifically for Fred, and that is, because we're under a state of emergency, Fred, do we have any flexibility to vote on anything that was not noticed in advance, or do we not?
Well, if I could respond, I wouldn't say you don't have any flexibility, but I agree with those who have said that we're not voting today on an amendment of the budget. I think most of the comments have been in line with this notion that the town manager is to take into consideration the desires of council and to get to work. I mean, that's always the case, even with the budget. Once it's adopted, it doesn't dictate how all your expenditures go. So I think if you want to amend the budget, I think you ought to put it on an agenda, and you ought to expose what it is you're thinking about doing on the budget in advance of the meeting, and then call for a vote. But I would agree that this is an entirely appropriate conversation, and that from it, the town manager and the department heads need to take those thoughts into consideration and implement the cost savings that they can.
Commissioner Jazinski, are you finished?
Yeah, that's good enough. Yes, thank you, Fred.
Commissioner Moskowitz and then Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, this is a dynamic situation that changes, and Commissioner Jazinski's proposal said based on how things are going with short-term rentals ban and stuff like that. Once the governor could make a decision any day, and he could say after Memorial Day weekend, short-term rental ban and hotels are lifted, and the town manager has the flexibility to go to the mayor and the commissioners and say, look, there's a lot more people coming into town and I need some more flexibility. We can adjust. We need some sort of target number, which I think Commissioner Jazinski put out. And I think there is consensus of the majority of commissioners. And I believe that we just have the flexibility to adjust as situations warrant. Once short-term rentals and hotels open and good weather comes where it's not rainy and windy every day, the beach patrol captain and the police chief can go to the town manager, who comes to us, and say, I need further flexibility. No one's stopping this conversation from happening. This is just, for now, under the current situation, this is what we envision needing. But 2-3 weeks from now, it could be a much different situation. It could be worse, could be better. So we just need the flexibility. The next meeting is 3 weeks from now. Perhaps it should be 2 weeks from now, but it is I think Rehoboth is doing weekly meetings. I don't think we need to go there, but perhaps we move up the next meeting a week from now. And just one more thought is anyone on the line for public comment, or so after we finish?
I'm not going to public comment yet. Thank you very much. Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, just a more point of clarification. I don't think anybody's suggesting that we would offer a motion that would formally amend our budget today. But I think we could offer a motion if we wanted to, that would direct the town manager to work with the department heads to seek possible savings of about $425,000. All that does is directs the town manager to take some action and to come back to us and to describe some options that we have for cutting that level of expenditures. So I would be perfectly comfortable seeking, even offering that kind of motion if others were comfortable with that.
Thank you, Commissioner. None of us, I'll get to you, town manager, just a second. None of us have said that we absolutely agree with a $426,000 cut. That is not an option that's on the board. That was a suggestion from a commissioner, and I think maybe or may not be valid, but may be valid. But that's not the option right now to vote on that. I don't believe also, and I might stand corrected, I don't believe we have the option to vote on telling the town manager to seek additional cuts. I think we have a sense of the commissioners, the majority of the commissioners, that we're asking him to seek additional cuts. And I think he will do that. I think he sees what we're saying and understands what we're saying and will do that. Commissioner Koenig, excuse me, Town Manager Koenig.
My only comment is that 426 is a big number. Those alterations are not going to start in 3 weeks. Those alterations will start as early as next week.
I'd like you to expound on that a little bit.
So to achieve $426,000 in savings, that's a big number. And I can't wait until June 12th to start implementing those things. I'm going to have to start implementing cost savings probably as early as next week.
Well, in all honesty, you already have started implementing cost savings, and we appreciate that. You've already cut back on projected staff for the summer. What we're asking for is you to discuss with the department heads where you could make some cost savings and get back with us on it. And with the idea that we're not suggesting, we're kind of insisting that you make that dramatic effort, not to actually cut, but to find out where you could cut.
That's not how I took that conversation earlier.
Oh, okay. Well, am I wrong, commissioners? Who had their hand up there to speak? I believe I'm right in that we've asked him to go out to department heads and see where he can cut and get back to us with a definite amount of money we can cut. Commissioner Bauer, you had your hand up first, and then Commissioner Moskowitz.
Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, and we're asking our town manager to make cuts to balance this budget. But we can't wait 3 more weeks to have a vote on this. So do you not want them to cut this today? Or are we going to wait until we're hitting 4th of July and then say, oh, now make the cuts? Now's the time to make the cuts. If we're going to make any cuts, I mean, it's cut back on some hours if we have to. But if we just keep kicking the can down the road, we're not going to get anywhere. I mean, come on, let's be realistic about this thing. Or would you rather cut in June or would you rather cut in July and August?
Mr. Moskowitz?
I agree with Commissioner Bauer. We need, this is the time to cut, June, not July and August, because July and August is hopefully the peak.
Well, the problem is we don't know where we would cut or can we cut, and that's what we're, in my opinion, that's what we're asking the town manager to do, to come up with additional cuts that he has more than he has so far.
Yeah, but it's like how Commissioner Judinsky put it. We're not like the town staff full time. The town manager can go to the beach patrol captain and the police chief and say, I need these amounts of cuts. Please present plans for me. And then they can make decisions. And 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, we can review those decisions and always adjust. But I believe that from starting Monday after Memorial Day to like the next few weeks, those are the times that the beach will probably be the least busiest, especially with senior week probably not existing now. So it's probably the time we can get away with cuts. And as Commissioner Bauer alluded to, July and August is probably the prime time, and we probably don't want to do less cuts back around then. So I think now is our opportunity.
Thank you. I just don't believe that we have the ability right now to designate a specific amount. And I don't believe we have the ability right now to put it to a vote. I believe, as I said earlier, I believe that if we give him a consensus of what to do, the town manager can act on it now because he would have a consensus of the commissioners, but we can't, I don't believe legislatively right now, put it to a vote. Commissioner Jazinski.
I believe it is imperative that we give the town manager a financial target on expenses that we want him to start to work towards immediately. I don't think it can be something that we discuss for another 3 weeks and then vote on in 3 weeks. I think we need to kind of give him a sense now of what the number is.
Commissioner Bauer, then Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I mean, this is an administrative, the budget belongs to the town manager, right? So he needs to be making these decisions. If we can't give him guidance, it's not clear. I mean, he's not going to be able to, we got to be fair to our town manager. That's all I got to say.
Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I guess I would like to be able to direct the town manager to begin making additional cuts in the budget with the anticipated target of reducing as much as $425,000 out of the total annual budget. But then I would like him to have the flexibility to come back to us. If it's somewhat unfair to ask him to begin to do this off the top of his head today, particularly without having talked to the department heads. But we can certainly ask him to go back and work on it. And he can come back to us and we can hold another meeting if necessary. If he's having some real serious problems in dealing with that overall target figure. And we can readjust at that point. I think this is a dynamic situation. There are too many unknowns in the equation here to be able to come up with one right answer. But again, to get him working in the right direction on additional cuts, to have an overall target, I think makes sense. I don't think it means a formal budget amendment at this point, but again, it gets, if you want to take advantage of the opportunity now to get some budget reductions, let's get those going right now.
And are you suggesting that as a motion?
Well, I can certainly suggest that a motion if you're willing to entertain that.
Well, I would like to ask the town attorney just how far we can go right now, since we originally put it on it as discussed budget and staffing revisions.
Well, personally, I don't think a motion is necessary, but if you were to ask the town manager to target a figure, I think it would be implied, if not expressed, that figure is a target and not a requirement. Obviously, it's not that it's not possible to require the town manager to save a specific amount of money versus a different number. But in my view, the council has given their direction to the town manager in this discussion that they want him to look for savings, to develop a plan for savings that will achieve a figure of $426,000. I think if you want to solidify that with a motion, you can, but I would suggest that the motion again be referred to as referred to a soft target or a target as opposed to an actual instruction.
Thank you, town attorney. Well, is there anybody Mr. Bauer?
Yeah, so if we're short $1 million and we're gonna direct the town manager to cut 426, are we saying that the remaining $500,000 is gonna come from rainy day or not? Or we're gonna wait 3 weeks to vote on that?
Commissioner Persinger.
I don't think we know for sure that we're going to have $1 million. $1 million deficit. We think we will. Could be more than that. If things really turn around, if the rental ban comes off sooner rather than later, revenues begin to improve. There's a possibility we're going to do better than we think. I think at some point we have to decide how much of our surplus revenues are backup revenues that we have available to us, how much of that we're willing to use. But I don't think we have to decide that today. I think the important thing to get going today is that we need some additional cuts in expenditures. We've given the town manager a target figure to work with. We've asked him to begin to reduce those expenditures, working toward that target immediately, but making a specific decision on how much we're willing to take out of the reserves. I don't think we have to make that decision at this point, particularly since we don't know exactly how much the shortfall is going to be exactly. We expect it's going to be a shortfall, but we don't know how large that's going to be.
Commissioner Persinger, I'll ask you again, did you want to make that as some sort of a motion then?
I will defer to the town solicitor's judgment that we really don't need a motion. I think we have given the town manager guidance. We've given him a sense of a target to work towards. We've asked him to begin to work on this and begin to achieve some savings right away. So I really I'm happy to do it if others think that it's necessary to have the motion, but again, I would defer to the town solicitor's judgment on that.
As chair, I just want to remind people, and I'll go to you, Commissioner Jazinski, shortly. As chair, I would like to remind you that it was put on as a discussion with the understanding that I had that if we had a consensus of the commissioners, that the town manager would be able to move forward. But do I have Ms. Hudson waving at me there? Would you like, did you want to make a comment?
No, I was just going to let you know, there are 3 people in the waiting room that would like to make public.
Okay, we'll get to that. Well, then let's do this. Let's go to the public comment, and then we'll finish off this subject when we come back from the public comment. Ashley Hudson, if you would line us up with somebody. The first one in line I see is Nancy. This is Dale Cook. Could you go ahead with your comments, please?
Hi, Nancy McCluskey.
Let's do this. Let's go to the public comment.
Nancy, you are still have YouTube on. If you can turn your YouTube off.
What do I have?
Turn your YouTube off and just listen through Zoom.
You're on the line, Nancy, if you would like to make a comment. First one in line I see is Nancy. Go ahead with your comments, please. Jesus, for just a delay there, folks.
I don't know how to turn off the YouTube. I want to just go back to Scott's original comment that he said that they.
Turn off your voice, Nancy, turn you back on and turn off your background noise.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Scott made a comment that they payroll is 10,000 less than last year already.
Go ahead.
I want to just go back to Scott's original comment that he said that they. See.
YouTube.
If everybody else would hold on.
I don't know how.
The volume.
Not the volume, just exit out of YouTube and leave on Zoom. That will do everything.
If everybody would just wait to keep listening to us, we've got to be quiet for a little bit. Ms. Hudson, if you could tell everybody that's on the waiting list what to do so that we don't have to go through this each time, I appreciate that.
Or when they log in.
We go to the next person, perhaps?
Wait 1 second. Nancy, are you still there? If everybody would just wait to keep listening to it, we've got to be quiet for a minute. Well, I'm going to wait 1 more minute and then I'm going to move on.
Okay, I think I did it.
Okay, good.
Get off the YouTube completely. Just get off.
I'm good, Ashley.
But everything. Do you have additional comments?
I'm here.
Go ahead.
All right, Scott mentioned that the payroll savings is already 10,000 for this year. The April report that was published showed payroll is 11,000 over. Okay, I think I did it.
Okay, good. Is that all your comment?
Like she.
They have a picture of me on the Zoom of me holding a fish. It's the one from.
Dennis
Okay, actually, we're going to move on to the next comment. Who's the next person in line?
Dennis Trencher is on the line.
Dennis Trencher, do you have a comment?
Can you hear me first?
Yes, we can.
Hallelujah. I was looking more of the income than the cuts. This past week, certain houses, 123 Caroline, 202 Jersey, 114 and 116 had cars that had out of town license plates. I'm not saying they're sisters and brothers, but there's two things we're losing. One is, well, several things. One is it's against the regs. On Jersey, two people that live across from this house have, problems with their health. Yeah. And also, we're not going to get the rental, the taxes on that, because these people, if they're being rented illegally, and they're not going to report that. And we're going to have this problem. We've always had this problem when I was on the audit committee, but we're going to have this problem in the future. Yesterday, I made quite a few phone calls and texts, and there's some confusion on who will monitor this, the police or the code people. I think the police eventually did, but how are we going to monitor this? And I think we have to be more strict, even though we don't want to upset people, than we have been previously. Comments are appreciated.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. It's not a question and answer period. That's I don't want to go into a question and answer.
Okay.
Can I ask, what were those addresses?
Wait one second, Commissioner Bauer. Ms. Hudson, is there anybody else on the line?
It looks like Nancy is back on, and Kelly Raniere was on the line. She had to go, but she asked if I could make the comment for her.
Okay, well, how about we go to Nancy first and then back to you, Ms. Hudson. Nancy?
I keep signing out of YouTube. I don't know if it's worked. Probably not.
It sounds okay.
Yes, it sounds all right.
Yeah.
So payroll savings were reported as $10,000 so far. Scott's April's report show that we spent $11,000 more than the prior year of April in payroll. So is he saying that the payroll for May is cut back 20,000? So my concern is the accuracy of the information. Also, the 426,000 savings is off of a million and a half cut in revenue. So that still would leave us $1 million deficit. So the town has to cut as much expenses as possible and hope that the revenue doesn't go down $1.4 million. So the picture is much more drastic than the $1 million. It's $1.4 million that the revenue is being, for $1.5 million that the worst case scenario of revenue is forecasted by Scott.
Thank you. Is that it?
That's it. The payroll distortion, not knowing where we stand in payroll, concerns me.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Ms. Hudson, if you will give us the comment from Ms. Raniere.
She stated regarding the beaches, her suggestion was to use flags to designate swimming beaches only and have swimmers stay in between the flags in the guarded beaches if they end up doing every other street with lifeguards.
So she's saying that Delaware beaches, Delaware State beaches, you mean?
No, she's suggesting that for Dewey to use the swimming flags and have that as a swimming only zone if it is every other street for lifeguards.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I believe that's also true, but Commissioner Bauer, you had your hand up. I'm going to go around for people who have their hand up, and then we've got to decide to end this subject and move on. So.
No, my hand was up because, I wanted to move on because Nancy couldn't speak at the time. But yeah, I think everybody was saying the same thing here. I mean, if we have $1 million or more, as Gary said, it might be more. The only thing we're talking about is 426,000 today. So that's where we're at.
Is there anybody, the commissioner have their hand up to want to speak? Commissioner Persinger.
Just quickly, I mean, again, we don't know how big the deficit's going to be. We know it's going to be there. Could be more, could be less. At least the $425,000. I hate using the exact figure of 426. I'm trying to round it back to something. But at least gives us a start. We can begin to understand what options Scott has for getting to some very significant budget cuts. And I think that's going to be extremely useful information. It'll help us make a decision. Once we know more about revenues, it will help us make an intelligent decision about how much of our surplus funds that we have available now, we're actually willing to use to close the gap, whatever gap that is.
So town attorney, one more time. Before I asked for a sense of the commissioners or a motion, what are we specifically allowed to do at this date?
What are you allowed to do?
Well, I'm talking about as far as a motion, or it was listed as discuss budget and staffing revisions, et cetera.
Well, I mean, the easiest position for me to defend, and I don't think this is a highly controversial issue at all, but I think the easiest position for me to defend is that you limit your action today to the discussion and discussion only. That's the way we apply. That's the meaning we apply to these words, and I would recommend that you follow that precedent.
Thank you. Commissioner Persner, did you have your motion? You had your hand up?
No, I do not. I'm perfectly content with not making a motion. I think we've given the town manager the sense of what we're interested in.
Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, this is for town manager, Scott Koenig. What is the 426,000 that you referred to? Is there any specifics to that? Like how did we come up with 426? What does that constitute?
Are you talking to the town manager or are you talking to Mr. Commissioner Jasinski?
No, I'm talking to a town manager.
Okay.
I believe the 426 references a series of cuts to the budget that's in line with the worst case scenario on the COVID-19 impact scenario sheet. So that's a target of that column there.
So 426, how much of that was lifeguard? How much was police? How much was code enforcement? and
Well,
staff?
on that sheet, almost half that was almost $200,000 was lifeguard.
200K to lifeguards. Police is how much?
It was a reduction of seasonal. Well, it was only taking the seasonal police from 20 to 16. That was the number that was listed there. So these were just estimates that were part of this overall spreadsheet. But this was.
Commissioner, do you have a question you want to ask of him?
Yeah, and the question is how are we arriving at 426? I mean, if we got 200,000 in lifeguards and 4 less seasonal, that doesn't seem to add up.
No, it's that 426 is a combination of cuts that are shown in the center column on the COVID-19 worksheet.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Commissioner Moskowitz.
I don't think I have an answer yet.
Oh, I thought you got that.
I don't think we got the 426. Right now, I know 200 and 4 less seasonals.
Town manager, can you not at this time? I'm going to say as chair, I'm not going to push you at this time to give us a specific answer to that 426 because a suggestion from the commissioners is not the force of a vote, and so we're not going to get to the 426. We're taking up time now. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, I was just wanted to reiterate what you said. I don't think we should put the town manager on the spot. I believe he knows there's a consensus to do 426 and that we possibly should meet in 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks and reevaluate the situation and what the economic situation is. But now is the time to do the cuts before summer renters return and things liven up. So
Commissioner Wayman, you just said now's the time to do the cut, and I've heard that earlier. We haven't told the town manager to cut. We have asked him to come up with possible cuts. We haven't asked him to actually cut. So please.
No, see, I took it.
Wait a minute, Commissioner, I'm talking. I'm going to, as chair, I'm going to tell you that explain exactly what you think you're saying and what you've actually said. Are you saying do the cuts or are you saying come up with possible cuts?
No, I think the town manager needs to both come up with them and do them while right now short-term rentals are banned and there's a time to do cuts. In 3-4 weeks, when short-term rentals get lifted, we may need a much more fully staffed up ramping and we won't be able to do the same amount of cuts then. But right now we're assuming there's no short-term rentals, so we can get away with doing these cuts. So, I mean, I took it as what Commissioner Jazinski, and I'll defer back to him, is that basically we should operate under the scenario, there's no short-term rentals, there's no hotels operating except for essential workers, and we can do some cuts based on 425,000. And then 3-4 weeks from now, or actually, well, I would prefer 2 weeks from now, we would meet again, see what the governor has done, the legislator has done, and then we can make amends and say, we'll have feedback. That's the only way you know.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you very much. Now, and I'll refer, as chair, refer to Commissioner Jazinski. He had his hand up. I can't hear you. Turn your mic on. Turn your mic on, Commissioner. Commissioner
Ashley was doing it at the same time as me. That's all that was happening. We were both hitting the button. Thank you, Chair, Mr. Mayor. All I'm asking is that when you wrap up this item in the agenda, I think it would be a good idea so that our town manager is clear that without a vote, each of us as commissioners give a number that is our sense of what target we want him working to on expense reduction. I think that's only fair to him so that he has a clear sense from each of us of what we are, even though we're not voting, just where we're at, because he's going to have to make some hard decisions. And I want it to be clear for him where the commissioners are.
All right, Commissioner Jazinski, go ahead and say, I'll entertain that. What amount would you like?
426,000.
Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I'm fine with the $426,000. I guess what I would say is we're trying to give the town manager the sense that we would like him to begin seeking additional budget cuts immediately with an ultimate potential target of $426,000.
Would you say that again? I missed it.
That we would like to direct, the sense of the commissioners today is that we would like the town manager to begin to seek immediate budget cuts with an ultimate potential target for the entire budget year of $426,000.
Thank you. Commissioner Moskowitz.
The same number, 426,000, because I believe, as it's been said, it's a multi-year effort, and it's not just savings from this year, maybe savings for future years. So 426.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't know how we're going to get to 426, but that's a good start. But we got to get to 1 million somehow.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So we're going halfway on it, and we're gonna try to make cuts in July and August, I guess. Then we're not going to make them in June.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I think it's a wrong decision for us all to make.
Well, but you just agreed to that decision. So
426 is a good start.
Decision. We can't have it both ways. I'm against this as in general, but I'm going to go along and say I'll support it, and I'll support it wholeheartedly, and to give the manager a goal to go to that cut. But it's not going to happen within the next week. It's not going to happen within the next 2 weeks. I can guarantee you that. But it's time to, town manager, do you understand the sense of the commissioners?
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's time to move on to the second item. We've gone an hour, let's see, an hour and 49 minutes, but it was necessary. Item number 2, discuss reopening goals of the beach region per the governor's phasing plan. Town manager, would you address that?
As soon as I find all the documents.
Thank you, town manager. We kind of put you on the spot. I apologize.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for us to move on yet. All right, so the governor sent out some various parameters that they really wanted us to focus on regarding opening of the beaches. So in some cases, Dewey has the good fortune that we just simply don't have some of the features that other beaches have. So we really don't have to address those things. With respect to things like bathrooms, boardwalk railings, benches, right now, the only public restrooms in Dewey Beach are related to the ones that were recently constructed on Van Dyke Avenue adjacent to the Hyatt. And the Hyatt is responsible for maintaining those bathrooms. However, the Hyatt is currently closed to vacation and leisure. Once they open back up for vacation and leisure, a schedule will be developed for those bathrooms. But right now, my recommendation is that they stay closed because the town is not supplying the staff to do that. And until the Hyatt ramps up their staff, they really don't have staff to be opening restrooms that I don't think are really necessary at this point until we're open to vacation rentals. As far as railings and stuff like that, we do not have a lot of railings in Dewey Beach. There is some small railing associated with the bay walk, the maintenance, like trash removal and stuff on the bay walk will be related to the Hyatt. Kind of the guidance that's coming out now is a little bit different than the guidance was previously, that surface contact is not as concerning as it was previously with respect to virus transmission. So I don't think any extraordinary efforts need to be made to wipe down those railings. We do have some benches that have been put throughout town. However, I haven't seen, at least during the day, I don't see people sitting on those. We'll see how the traffic changes as we go forward. There might be some reason to wipe those benches down on some type of schedule as we move into the season. We don't have arcade games, so we don't need to make any afford for those. As far as the beach entrances, we're not proposing to put any demarcation stuff up at the beach entrances. The state has provided some general signage to us that's been installed at the kiosks at the entrance to all the beaches to encourage people to social distance and to have their face coverings with them and wear them appropriate, and to continue to use hand sanitizer and stuff like that. Though we as the town are not providing hand sanitizer because we simply don't have the stations to do it. When we talk about enforcement teams, we are not hiring extra people to enforce any of this stuff. The lifeguards, along with the seasonal police, will be the ones that are primarily, the responsibility of educating people on these things. There is a lot of information that's come out from the state. We'll be promoting it through our social media channels and things like that. The business partnership is promoting it. I think all the businesses are promoting it. So I don't see us having to expend a lot of extra stuff on things like that. The limiting of the capacity to the beach was one of the recommendations. We do not have large parking lots, so we don't have to take any extraordinary efforts to limit the parking lots. The parking on the street is limited in some places because there's a ban on the leisure rentals right now. There are fewer people in general in town, so we don't expect, at least at this point, overcrowding issues related to our beach. Before this week, and I haven't been out there in the last couple of days, we had a lot of sand out there, so there was room for people to spread out, and the lifeguards will be encouraging that, monitoring that issue. The access points to our beach, we have roughly 20 access points. They're the ones that have been there for many, many years. I think most people tend to spread out on the beaches. So I don't think we have a lot of extraordinary effort that needs to be made to limit those things. The state had recommended beach ambassadors. On the ACT call, I would say none of the ACT towns that I recall saying that they were going to hire anybody to be a beach ambassador. They were not going to use volunteers because of most of the volunteers were older and they didn't want to put people in a position where they were going to be, their health was going to be compromised. So the communication of the kind of the social rules is being done through handouts. The state's giving us some stickers. They're doing a promotion for us. They gave us signage, and we will repeat that stuff for people. But we do not intend to hire people to be specifically beach ambassadors. I think the flow of traffic onto our beach is relatively steady. The only concern I really have is if it rains, that you'll have people, gagging up to get off the beach in a hurry if we have a pop-up thunderstorm or something like that. Other than that, it seems like the flow of traffic onto our beach is fairly spread out as it goes through the day. When you get into the face covering issue, they had said it's required on the boardwalk. It's being encouraged on the beaches. We're going to promote that with our social media channels and stuff like that. The requirements, the 6 foot distancing is really related to non-family members. Family members are allowed to congregate like that. After 5 p.m. today, we are going to allow the fire permits to be issued. That will be monitored somewhat by the vendor, because he, I think, supplies most all the time the supplies for the fire permits. But that, we're not encouraging large gatherings in the sense that, but we are interested in issuing the fire permits because people like them, and it's a good way to promote the beach. We don't have any public water fountains, so we don't have to do any actions necessary to that. Our concessionaire is, he also does concessions for other beach towns. So he is aware of the requirements that he's got to, clean the articles that are being shared with people. His staff will be doing protective measures related to their operations. And we don't expect any real issues with the beach vendor being able to comply with the requirements. Those are the major components of it. The beach, the company that grooms the beach will be grooming the beach. I don't know if they'll be grooming it as many times a week. It depends on the traffic that we get. So we're trying to make adjustments for that to kind of meet the demand. There is some grooming that's going to happen over on the bay side, and then we'll have to discuss further the Bayside rules and how they might impact us. But our beach, in my opinion, is a little more straightforward than some of the other ones because we have a fairly wide area. We don't have people getting bussed into our beach on a regular basis. And to be quite honest, I'm not really expecting many problems other than our typical ones that we have related to the beach. I think I'm hopeful that people will recognize the requirements and that there won't be a high level of monitoring necessary. I guess that's yet to be seen, but that's where we stand right now.
Thank you, Town Manager. Commissioner Bauer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, more of a question. What, if any, state assistance have we received to support the, enforcing the guidelines?
So the state delivered, 25 yard grade signs to us. Those signs have been put in the kiosks at the end of the streets. And they also delivered, I think it was 12 4x3 metal signs that have, for lack of a better word, I guess it's the monikers of social distancing and those encouraged activities on it. Those are larger signs. Don has put one at the life-saving station. He's put one, yeah, Ashley has it on her phone there,
yep,
at the Bay Beach. And then we're looking for some other places to put it. The problem is that it's been very windy out lately here. And this is a big sign. So we're trying to find areas where it will not get destroyed easily by wind, but be visible. So all 12 of those signs will not be up this weekend. We'll probably put a few more up next week. But we have stickers, we have promotional items that the state has provided to us to at least get some information out there. I know they sent us the JPEGs of it. We've sent those out on social media. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to post stuff from the state regarding the artwork and stuff that they're distributing relative to whatever the subject matter is. So that's where we stand right now with assistance from the state.
Thank you, Town Manager. Commissioner Moskowitz?
Well, I wasn't done yet, Dale.
Oh, I'm
So,
sorry.
With respect to the beach ambassadors and enforcing social distancing on beach, are we getting any assistance from the state to enforce the rules that the state has put down on us?
Yeah, other than the kind of the promotional things I just talked about, there's no direct assistance. There's no funding. There's no manpower.
Right. I mean, we're going to get the criticism that we're not putting beach ambassadors out there. We're not doing what the governor's asked us for, yet we're not getting any funding to do that.
Yes.
Is there any feedback from ACT? Is anybody getting any funding for that?
Nobody's getting any more funding than we are.
So we just have to put bodies out there. We have to incur the cost.
It is a suggestion that we will have, as a lot of the towns are doing the same thing we're doing. They're, number one, they're afraid to ask for volunteers because they don't want the volunteers taking the chance of getting sick or confronting, or confronting the people who might not want to follow the regulations. So we're doing what a lot of the beach towns are doing, asking our lifeguards and our police to act as ambassadors for that, and just informing. They're not demanding, they're not attempting to arrest anybody, they're not attempting to put anybody off. They're just telling them what the regulations are. Is that correct, Town Manager?
Yes, we want to avoid as much conflict as possible, but getting the message across.
Commissioner Bauer, is that okay?
No, I mean, that I agree. I mean, we don't want to be arresting people. That's not our goal. But I mean, if we're required to do this by the state, I mean, we can A, comply, or B, not comply. We don't have beach ambassadors at the head of every street coming into the beach, right?
We don't have them.
Right.
Thank you. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yes, some of the state is recommendations, not must do. But my question was to the town manager. So I understand like what CDC had stated, but the State Department of Health for Delaware is stating that bathrooms need to be cleaned every 15 minutes to 2 hours. So once the public bathroom is reopened and Hyatt is cleaning it, the question is we may need, or the concern is we may need to clean it every 2 hours based on what the state.
We'll have to discuss it with the people that do the cleaning, then we'll have to figure out what'll happen then.
Yeah, correct. But I'm just saying, like, we can't, there's a federal law, but there's a federal government giving advisory statement, but it's also the state government, and the state government is saying 15 minutes to 2 hours. Now, there's been talk back and forth, like, for instance, I have a pool that you could close the bathroom, and then if you close the bathroom, people will go out in public, and then it creates a different situation. So I would just ask the town manager to speak to the hotel and see if it can be cleaned every 2 hours.
Who's going to clean it?
How about you and I and the town manager discuss that, David, at a later time, rather than go into a dissertation now in the middle of the meeting of how often we're going to clean the bathrooms. So.
Well, it's not my view; it's the state's view. I'll send you.
It was your view. I just said, how about we do that offline?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from anybody? Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I have several comments and a couple of questions. First of all, question: what was your intention? What did you intend to do with this document? Were you going to finalize this and make this a publicly available document? I mean, I suggested that we put together something like this following the governor's outline. I would really like to see us have a public document so that it is available. It lets everybody know in the public, what it is we're trying to do, what policies we're trying to enforce, or at least to follow.
I would only suggest you, I apologize for interrupting. I would only suggest to you that any document we have in our possession right now for this meeting, and especially background documents, are public documents.
Oh, I understand that. That's not the issue. The issue is, do we take this, put this into a final form and then actually promote it in some way? We post it in a prominent place on the website. We make people aware that this is our policy with respect to reopening the beach according to the governor's guidelines. Is there a
Gotcha.
thought to do that?
I think town manager, yes, I think that's a possibility. Town manager?
Yeah, I mean, unless there's proposed changes to this, we can convert this to administrative policy, put it on letterhead and post it, which we'd be happy to do.
Okay.
And we could even send it out, to be honest, if the commissioners want it sent out as part of the listserv email, we can send it out that way so that we know at least it reached those groups of people.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, I did have some comments on this, some suggestions. The first suggestion I would have is not talk about opening plan recommendations, but in some sense to convey this as a document that provides a policy, our policy with respect to reopening the beach. Policy may not be the right word, but recommendations, I think, is the wrong word. You talked a bit about the signs, and as I think I understood that there is a sign at each beach entrance. Is that correct?
That's
each of the
correct.
20 entrances? Okay.
Yeah, it's a smaller sign. So it looks a lot like the political sign size that we've put up into the kiosk at the end of each beachhead, at the end of each
Okay.
street.
And so how many of the larger signs do we have?
So there were 25 of the smaller signs. There's 12 of the larger signs. And so we've put up 2 now. There should be 10 left at this point.
Okay, well, I think some judgment hopefully can be made at the staff level about where the highest volume is in terms of people going to the beach, and put those larger signs up there.
Commissioner, I'm gonna interrupt one more time. The only reason they're not all up is because they were worried about the sturdiness of the sign, whether it would withstand the wind.
Understood. In terms of enforcement teams, you said, I believe, that enforcement, or at least the duty of providing advice to beachgoers, will be the responsibility of the lifeguards and seasonal police. So I think you might want to say something in there that those are the specific people who are charged with enforcement, if you will, and that they are readily identifiable. The seasonal police have a uniform. The lifeguards are clearly identified as well. So, I think that would better satisfy what the town, or what the governor rather, has recommended, or actually required in his outline. I would like to see some, in terms of limiting capacity and limiting crowd volume, that there be some recognition that there are some beach access points that are fed by multiple hotels. And once the rental ban is lifted, those are the potential places where you could have some problems. Probably not so much at the entrances themselves, but my house is on Dickinson. I'm familiar with a steady flow of people back and forth on the beach down there. And you have the Hyatt, you've got a couple of other hotels and motels. And when you get to the beach area, you actually have a significant possibility that you will get a situation where it becomes somewhat difficult to socially distance. So I think you may want to take some consideration of, as you say, continuing to evaluate the need for maybe not beach ambassadors, but some sort of enforcement personnel to provide some help to people in finding a place on the beach where they can, in fact, satisfy the social distancing requirements. And then lastly, I would just note, I believe I read in the paper today, I think it was in the Washington Post actually, that Bethany Beach is hiring beach ambassadors for their beach. So we may want to confirm that and see how they're approaching that.
The only thing I would say, thank you, Commissioner, that all great comments, and I recognize, I will recognize the rest of the commissioners. Most of the when we discussed on the call-in between the Association of Coastal Town, the mayors, and the town manager, most of them, the vast majority, and Mr. Koenig, you might correct me if I'm wrong here, but the vast majority said, number one, they didn't want to put volunteers out there doing this job. They were afraid that they might get ill from it, number one, and might have confrontations, number two. And then the rest of them, most of them said they were going to use their own personnel I don't know if Bethany has changed that, but I thought they were doing the same thing. Is that correct, Mr. Koenig?
Yeah, they may be just using existing positions and renaming them, but a majority of the people said they weren't going to hire people specifically as beach ambassadors, as like additional staff other than they had originally planned, because the state wasn't providing any dollars for that.
Okay, I believe Commissioner Bauer had his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, this ties in two things. If we're going to look at condensing the number of lifeguard stands, we're encouraging people to swim closer to the lifeguards, right?
That's correct.
Yet we're trying to tell them to stay away, social distance. You understand you understand how people might get confused on what we're trying to tell them right now? Are we telling them to social distance or get closer together because we're going to have half the number of lifeguards? I don't know what the message is here, Mr. Mayor and Town Manager, but we're going to have to come up with a consistent message. What are we trying to tell people to do?
You're correct. You're correct. Any other commissioners have any comments on the guidelines or what, not actually guidelines? And Mr. Bauer, Mr. Persinger doesn't particularly want to call them recommendations. I wouldn't mind calling them recommendations, but it looks like the town attorney, did you have a comment?
Well, how about practices? Is that not strong enough a term?
Well, how about that you recommend to the Mr. Persinger, if you have some comments, you might give them to the town manager later on, and same with everybody else and our town attorney the same. So are we pretty much, Commissioner Persinger again?
I will send the town manager my suggestions for some changes in whatever we call this policy. Hopefully it's not recommendations, because I think it's more than that, but practices certainly might make sense here. I would like to get more of an idea when we think we could bring this to a close. I would hate to wait. I don't think we can wait, to get this done and to get this out to people. Maybe if we come to some agreement that we could all provide comments to the town manager, let him make the final cut, and then get this document completed and out.
Town manager, you have any problem with that?
Yeah.
Do you have a date that you would suggest you'd like to get those comments?
I think we need these. I'd like to have this document posted by the 1st of June. So I'd like everybody's comments next week so we can finalize it before Friday into business.
All right, Commissioner Bauer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, who's going to be doing enforcement? Is that lifeguards or police?
Well, we're talking about who's going to be doing enforcement?
Right.
So I don't like to use the word enforcement on this, because this is where it's going to get us into real conflict.
We're just telling people what they should do, not as a law.
When you say we, who do you mean specifically?
Well, on the beach, it's going to be the lifeguards.
Okay.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Commissioner Persinger?
Yeah, I would actually like to make the time frame on this even tighter. I'd be happy to get my comments back by Monday. I think other commissioners should be able to do the same thing and let the town manager move forward with this. And just with respect to enforcement, enforcement is a term that's used in the governor's outline, where he says identify enforcement teams. In our comments, I don't think we have to talk about the staff that we use as enforcement. We could simply say, in response to that particular item in the outline, that that we will have staff presence on the beach or seasonal police and lifeguards on the beach to provide advice to beachgoers and remind them of the social distancing requirements and restrictions on group size.
Everybody could send those comments into the town manager rather than keep talking.
I will do that. I'm just suggesting the way that we handle that particular issue.
Gotcha. Okay. Can we move on to the next item then? Item number 3, discuss and possibly vote on interim rules for the Bayside Beach and Boardwalk adjacent to the Hyatt complex. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, so I have 3 issues with these rules. One is the Bayside Lifeguard. We just talked about how we're in a financial situation. The last few years, we've never had a Bayside Lifeguard. I don't see from a safety standpoint why it's necessary to have a Bayside Lifeguard. I believe it would be wasted money, so I believe that should be omitted from this. The second thing is traditionally in the Bay, dogs have been allowed all day. I don't understand why we would restrict dogs to only certain times, because there's not much, as the Cove owners alluded to, there's not much grass area there. And then we'd be creating a special dog area, which is going to smell. It makes no sense. So I would like to see dogs available all day. And my third concern is weddings. Last year at this time, or I guess last July, August, we talked about setting up a special wedding policy. And you have homeowners who have waited 10 years for the Bayside Beach to be done. And the sunset's going to come, and how many weddings will we allow? So I think there either needs to be some sort of limit on weddings, some sort of like number of weddings allowed, or time restriction of weddings. I just think you have a lot of property owners and the public who want to use the beach. And I understand weddings are half hour, but it might interfere in those property owners' uses. I mean, one suggestion would be we omit the weddings from this draft interim rules, and then we come up with a much better policy with public input on weddings alone. But those my three concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioner that has concern? Commissioner Jazinski, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you for taking the time to put these rules together. It's not that easy to kind of do it and get input and come up with it. So the first was on the hours of the bay walk, specifically being 24/7. I'm just wondering if maybe we might want to consider making it the same way as the beach with the 1 to 5 a.m. curfew. There are fire pits. We're looking to get benches on there. I'm just not sure we really want it open all night. It could end up being a little bit of a nuisance in those nighttime hours when the beach is normally closed. The second thing is on the guarding of the beach, basically what Dave said. When it was dedicated in 2014, it was specifically dedicated as being a non-guarded beach. It's very much a nice to have. I'd like us to be able to do it at some point. I just think given our current financial situation, we have to kind of maybe hope for that in a future date. And then the third and last comment I had on it was bonfires on that beach. That beach is closer to a lot of people's homes than the Oceanside beach. And my only concern is, bonfires are usually at night. It could end up being a nighttime kind of smoke and noise, a nuisance, depending on which way the breeze is blowing. And I'm just kind of wondering, do we really want to have bonfires on that beach? It'd be very popular. Sunset with a bonfire at nighttime afterwards, it sounds fabulous. I'm just wondering if it could end up turning into a public nuisance. That's it.
Town manager?
Yes, I think I wrote this down correctly, but I have a response to those things. So in the discussion about the Baywalk being open beyond 1 a.m. and not closing with the beach, I consider the Baywalk similar to a public sidewalk, and we don't close public sidewalks. So one of my concerns was I did not want to get complaints of people leaving the Rudder and walking back to Marina View or those other communities south of the Rudder and using the Baywalk after 1 o'clock. I see it as a public sidewalk. I think it's safer than walking on Route 1 at that time of night, at least given the circumstances. So that was the thinking behind keeping the Baywalk open later than 1 a.m. and then really allowing it to just be used all hours. The guarding issue, if the commissioners don't want the beach guarded, that's fine. We do have a drinking issue on that beach. There's a lot of drinking that happens on that beach. It's always been a lot of drinking on that beach. Saying that we're going to address it with the seasonal police. The seasonal police officers work in tandem, so there's usually 2 of them associated with whatever area that they're patrolling. So the intent on the Bay Lifeguard was that was a person that could enforce these rules over there And it wasn't necessarily that we would be guarding it every day or all day long every day. But that's how it was budgeted, as if we were guarding it from, I think, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. That's how we budgeted originally. The issue of bonfires, originally I agreed we shouldn't have bonfires. My discussion with the Hyatt was that they were willing to identify an area on the beach over closer to the Hyatt where the bonfires could be done. Their recommendation was the bonfires could only be done there if they were using the vendor to set them up. They could not be set up by individuals. They would have to use the vendor. There was a test run that was done by the chamber, and the embers were blowing very close to other units on Van Dyke. The only way I think that we could even consider the bonfires is if there was a space that was over closer to where kind of the lighthouse restaurant is, and with DBE recognizing that the ember wind blow is really right into their complex, and we would have to be working with them to monitor it. But when we first started talking about whether we could or couldn't have bonfires, my answer was we shouldn't because of the prevailing winds. They feel like it's something that would be attractive, that could be done safely if it is solely coordinated through the vendor, and it's done in an area that's really closer to the Hyatt or to the convention center area versus the gazebo area over adjacent to Van Dyke. So those were things that were talked through with all of the representatives from DBE. These are recommendations, are certainly available for modifying.
Thank you, Town Manager. There was another commissioner person, you had your hand up, and then I'm going to speak after that.
Okay, yeah, I had several comments. First of all, in terms of the hours of operation for the Bayside Beach and gazebo, it just seemed, and I've sent you this comment already, it seemed a little awkwardly worded to say, first of all, that it's open to the public 24/7, 365. Yeah, there are curfew hours from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., so it's never really open 24/7, 365. So there's a better way to say that, a clearer way to say that. That is a minor point. On the second page, the town shall assist with determining a suitable distance for mooring on Rehoboth Bay to assure the safety of persons recreating in the bay. I'm not sure how suitable would be determined. I also wonder if there's a liability issue if some injury occurs and someone then decides to challenge our definition of what suitable distance is. It just seems to be very vague. Either shouldn't be addressed or it needs to be addressed more specifically, at least in my view. DBE and the town will coordinate routine beach cleaning services. Again, I don't know what that means. How will you coordinate that? Will you each kind of point the finger at the other and say, well, it's your turn today. You go ahead and clean the beach. There ought to be some better specificity for that, I think. With respect to dogs on the beach, when I initially read this, I had no problem with the way it was stated, but there has been some feedback from some of the public objecting to the fact that this really changes the way that they have been using the beach currently and over, I guess, over the past few years. So I wonder if we might not consider allowing dogs on the beach during the season from 9:30 to 5:30 p.m., but only if they're on a leash. That would provide control of the dogs, hopefully make the pet owners more responsible in terms of cleaning up. I'm not sure that a small area designated just as pet business only is a good idea. I think that creates a potential problem, particularly for children on the beach in my mind. I'm not sure. I'm a little concerned about the town special use permit for, let's see, that's for fires. I guess for weddings and other special events. It says it will be administered by Dewey Beach Enterprises and coordinated with the town. I'm not sure, again, the language there is kind of vague. You know, on what basis would the town object or would Dewey Beach Enterprises object if the town were to say, you know, we don't agree that you should have a permit for a wedding? Should there be some sort of limit on that? Should there be some sort of time of year during which you could or couldn't have these kinds of events? And then finally, my final question is there some, with respect to lifeguards, I would agree. I don't think that we have the money in the budget right now for a lifeguard. And I also would not expect, just as I really don't expect the lifeguards on the Oceanside beach to really be responsible for alcohol enforcement. It does not work at all. It certainly doesn't work well. If you go to any of the trash containers at the end of any given day on the Oceanside beach, you will find them full of alcohol containers. So if there's going to be some enforcement over there, it needs to be someone, I think, other than a lifeguard. But I think our basic problem is we simply don't have the money for that. Lastly, is there an intention that the town would add the Bayside Beach to the Oceanside concession contract? And if so, what impact is that going to have on our current contract with them? So that's all I had.
All right, I had one person that raised their hand. I said I was going to talk, but I'll cede it to Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, question for Fred. Since the Bay Beach is a public beach, correct?
Yes.
All right, so when we did our last maps, that beach didn't exist before, correct?
I don't know. Is that right?
I mean, they put the sand in there to create that beach. Have we ever annexed that into our town property lines?
Town property line, I believe, I just want to insert here, I believe goes to the high water mark on the beach.
Was it the high water mark before they put the beach in or after they put the beach in?
No, it was put in with the approval of the state, so it has to be. the
So
high
that's a
water
state,
mark.
so you're saying that is state land then?
It's what?
Is that state land or is that Dewey Beach land?
I would tell you that the entire beaches in all of Delaware belong to the state, and we are allowed to manage them.
Right, but I'm looking for a legal definition. Fred, can you help me out with that?
Not right this second. I mean, I have at different times looked at the distinction between our jurisdiction over the Bay and Oceanside beaches. I just don't recall where I came down, but I mean, there are references in our charter to Bay beaches.
Bay Beach is right, Sunset Park.
I mean, they existed before we put any sand in there. I mean, we have jurisdiction over this beach that we're referring to today, and we have since day one, since the town was created.
So I don't mean to butt in, but
Thank you.
The beach and the shoreline is covered by a subaqueous permit. I believe it's either a two-party between DBE and DNREC, or it's a three-party between Dewey Beach, DBE, and DNREC, and it may vary depending on where you are. But the actual shoreline is owned by the state, and then we have certain custodial rights and rights to regulate things similar to we do in the right-of-ways for DelDOT. Right. But we don't have the right as the town to modify the shoreline unless we get a permit from DNREC for anything like that.
So DNREC is state then, right?
Right. So the actual beach itself, the land, I think is under the control of the state of Delaware.
So can we even have this discussion if this is state-owned land, putting rules on state-owned land?
They're all state-owned properties.
Yes, because we essentially do the same thing on the ocean beach. So a majority of the rules that we're talking about, not all of them, but a majority of them are the same ones that necessarily apply to the beach, the ocean beach.
Right. So my concern of putting some restrictions out there. So for example, there are people booked in 2020, 2021, 2022, they have beach weddings. What do we do? If we cut it off, are we going to reimburse them?
Commissioner, who are they booked with? Who are they booked with?
They booked the weddings with the Hyatt, and then I guess do we have any permits sitting there for weddings coming up? Most of the weddings are on Hyatt's property, by the way, but are we going to restrict people from coming out of their wedding and going onto the beach for pictures, et cetera? it's a bad precedence to throw out there, by the way, but we can talk about it.
But I'm going to speak after Commissioner Bauer. So Mr. Moskowitz, I noticed you.
Yeah.
I didn't get an answer yet.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Commissioner Bowers. I was letting Commissioner Moskowitz notice that he had his hand up. That's all.
Okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner Bauer.
No, so, yeah, what are we gonna do for people? It's a public beach, so if they have a wedding on the deck of the Hyatt, are we trying to tell them they can't walk onto the beach because we're trying to limit the number of people having quote unquote weddings on the beach? I mean, the wedding's on the Hyatt's property. That's a public beach that they're walking onto afterwards, such as the gazebo. That's not where they're having the wedding at, correct?
I think you're parsing it a little bit too much. You know, if they have a wedding on the deck of the Hyatt that belongs to the Hyatt, that's not our business. We don't regulate that. But when people come onto the beach, they have to follow certain regulations. No regulation would be there to restrict them from coming onto the beach, but no regulation would be there to restrict other people from walking through that same area.
I agree.
Okay,
Making
so
sure that's the message we're sending to people.
no, I don't think so. I don't believe. I have a couple comments about the regulations. There's a couple of spots, a few spots that says, for instance, for events exclusively managed by the Hyatt Place Hotel and permits secured from the town of Dewey Beach. I don't know that we can have any event that's exclusively managed or required to be managed by the Hyatt Hotel on a public beach. And for another area says, I have a problem about dogs, and we're going to get to the people who are waiting for the dogs. I'm sorry. Mr. Koenig, you want to interrupt?
No, I just would like to add a couple comments. I think we need
Let me finish my comments before we get to you, if you would, please. In general, I have a problem with the entire set of rules that were put up. I sent to the town manager. I was late, by the way, and it's my fault. You didn't get them on time. We said we should have them in by Monday. I don't know how many of you put them in by Monday. I didn't. I put them in 2 days later. I told him I was going to be late, but that doesn't make up for it. But I think the rules need to be merged in with the actual beach rules that the town has presently. And I sent a merged form to the town manager. And by the way, just moments before this meeting occurred, I sent them to your email address so that I wouldn't be accused of trying to persuade you for this terms of this meeting. I didn't want any FOIA problems with that. We've got enough problems when we actually do something wrong. So I think all the regulations for that beach should be merged in with the regulations for the ocean beach. And I think that we should not have different regulations for dogs on the Bay Beach than we do on the ocean beach. I don't think we should have any one group of people or private entity that has a say over or setting up and tearing down things on the beach. The ocean beach doesn't have it that way, and I don't believe the Bay Beach should have it that way. I think we're going to have the same problems we have on the ocean beach, and we'll have those problems on the Bay Beach. So I would encourage you not to, hands are already up, Mr. Bauer, I appreciate that, thank you. I would encourage you, in my opinion, we shouldn't vote for any finalized agreement today because we have lots of people that want to, excuse me 1 second, I want to write down the names. It was Commissioner Moskowitz, Commissioner Bauer, and Commissioner Persinger is going to have comments. Okay. I'm just saying that we have lots of changes that you all are requesting today in this group of proposed rules that got sent out to you. And I don't think we're going to come to a final agreement today. So that's my comments. Now I would go to Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, I agree with the mayor that we shouldn't vote on anything today. We should come up with a final set of rules. The other thing to the solicitor, We have an MAR agreement and some historic legal agreements. So any rules we come up with, we want to make sure is in agreement. Someone had sent me some of the previous MAR agreement from one of the Cove property owners. And it says, like, for example, no permanent or temporary structures of items such as table, chair, benches, umbrellas, signs, kayaks, or watercrafts shall be placed on the beach by DEBE or any other commercial enterprise or otherwise situated in a manner that restricts use or access to the beach. We just have to be careful. Whatever we do is right based on the past legal agreements we have, and it's right for DBE. It's right for the Hyatt Condo Association, Marina View, the Cove, and the public. So I agree with what the mayor stated about having a good set of rules before voting on it.
Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, as far as the ocean rules and the beach rules, I'm going to remind everybody of some of them that are going to be troublesome for a lot of people. One is launching kayaks. Can't do that on the beach. All the water sports that go on in the beach, you won't be able to do that anymore if we go down that route. At a time where I think we can all agree that we've lost customers with this whole pandemic. We don't have people coming to our town right now. We're going to have to work to get them back. And I think putting added, if we eliminate water sports on the bay, you're not going to have a lot of happy people about that. And I'm not sure who that's hurting, but they've been launching kayaks over on Dickinson for how many years? They're going to say they're grandfathered. You're allowing it on Dickinson, but you won't allow it on Van Dyke, right? So I'm just, putting it out there for us to talk about. I mean, how long is that? Cape Pasa used to launch kayaks there, and we're going to say you can't do that anymore. You know what I mean? So we're not going to vote on it today, so we'll save that for another day. But let's have an honest, open discussion about it. But I'd like to see people coming back to this town. I don't want to tell them can't do this, can't do that, can't do anything here anymore. If we've been allowing it for a couple decades, now's not the time to say, yeah, we're done with that though.
Okay, Commissioner Persinger.
I'm about 10% battery left here. I forgot to plug it in, so I'm going to be signing on a different tablet. But just very quickly, I agree. I don't think we're ready to vote on something today. I think part of the problem that we have is that this wasn't the process.
Two pictures on now, Commissioner.
Okay, well,
Gary's.
Take whichever one you think is better. I think the problem that we have is that this isn't the process that we were going to follow. We knew we had to develop a set of rules. We talked about this months ago, and we were going to have a public process for doing that. And we get overwhelmed by events, and unfortunately, we didn't have that public process. I don't think we've had enough public input on this. I don't think we've had enough opportunity for both DBE and for the town to fully understand exactly what rights each party has and what requirements each party has. I think we need a little more time. I think the value of today is that we get out on the table the kinds of issues that we believe are the right approach, the kinds of issues that other people may believe are the right way to go as well. And that we provide this a little more time so that we have some more opportunity to get some additional input and to sort out some of the issues that we're all struggling with today.
I promised the town manager I would go to him, and I haven't yet. I'm going to go to the town manager, the town attorney, the town manager.
Yes, so I think it's important that we hear from Bill Lauer, but he sent me his comments. So I'm going to read some of them real quick, and then I don't know if he's in the waiting room. We might be able to get him in here. But DBE in the MAR, I think, is required to provide certain programming that's open to the public. So that may be part of the reference to events sponsored by DBE because it's part of the MAR. But Mr. Lauer's comments, one is dogs shall be permitted on the beach throughout the year. The only restriction is from 9:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. during summer season. Even during this period, however, dogs will have a special designated location on the bayside beach. This is greater permission than what is allowed on the oceanside beach. That was his first comment. Second comment is DBE is committed to not interfering with public recreation on the beach and Baywalk, even during special events. This is a requirement of our lease with the state of Delaware. DBE pays a fee of $24,000 per year to the state for this public amenity for all to enjoy. And so he can elaborate on that more. But I think it's important that there's a business side to this in addition to kind of the public side of it. If we are able to issue beach fire permits, it's a revenue, it's an enhancement, it's something that's enjoyable to do. And as long as we can do it safely, it's a revenue stream that will, I think, be very useful to us. The second issue, renting and coordinating the use of the gazebo is important. It's going to be very hard for us to coordinate that from town hall because we can't see it. And there has to be some agreement on how it gets cleaned and all that stuff. We don't have staff to do that. We did not hire extra people to manage the gazebo. So if we're going to try to earn revenue off of the gazebo, we're going to have to work out some type of cooperative effort, most likely with DBE to help us with that. The special events, again, wedding permits require, I think there's a fee. I think it's like, what is it, $25 or something like that per?
$100.
I'm sorry?
$100.
$100. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a revenue stream. And while there's not expansive sand over there, there's enough sand over there to recreate, hold these events, probably allow kayaks to be launched, and doing all these things I think are possible. It's just going to require some coordination amongst the property owners over there, DBE, and the town. And I think everybody wants that beach to be very busy and useful to the community. And I think it's got all of the amenities and the layout to do what all of us would like it to do.
Thank you, Town Manager. I'm going to go to the Town Attorney and then Commissioner Moskowitz, and then I'm going to go to public comment. Town Attorney.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of quick points. With respect to bonfires, we have the authority to grant permits, as just was discussed by the town manager. And in granting those permits, I think you have the right to take into consideration where you're putting them and in what proximity they are to private property and what risk they pose as opposed to the risk they traditionally pose on the ocean side. So I think it's fair to say that while we have the authority to permit on the ocean, we ought to have the same authority to permit on the beach. The restrictions imposed by the town may be different given the different geography there. Our beach definition is expressed in the code, and rightly or wrongly, I have no reason to think that it violates state law, is from, on the bay side, from private property 100 feet into the bay. So that's a long-standing definition. On the ocean side, it's from the crest of the dune 100 feet into the ocean. So that's how we define beaches by our ordinance. And Mr. Moskowitz is quite correct about the existence of language in the MAR, which I interpret to mean that Dewey Beach Enterprises is not to make exclusive use of the beach and not to engage in certain activities which would exclude others from their use of the beach. So I think that's a little bit of a distinction between telling the public they can't launch a boat, for instance, or a kayak from there. I'm not sure where in the rules, I've scanned them, it could be interpreted to say that the public can't launch a kayak into the bay. And then the wedding permits, again, it falls into the same category as the bonfires. We have the authority to grant or deny the permits, and presumably we have some public or we have some considerations that go into that. It's not just you pay the $100 and you get the permit. That you have to define the area you're going to use, and presumably the town. Yes.
You're freezing up.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. And presumably the town has the authority to say that this permit can be granted under certain circumstances and not under others. So I think there's some discretion there that the administration has in the granting or denying of the permits.
Thank you, Attorney. I'm going to go to Commissioner Moskowitz, and then I'm going to speak with Ms. Hudson before we go to the public. Commissioner Moskowitz, go ahead.
Yeah, I agreed with what Commissioner Persinger had said earlier about, like, I believe it's a fair compromise letting dogs off leash during the usual times they're allowed off leash on the beach, and then from the 9:30 to 5:30 in the summer season, requiring a leash but letting them be on the beach. I think that's a compromise, and it's something that would probably work for most people. And just the second thing, because I can see the headlines now, Dewey Beach looks to ban kayaks and paddle boards. No one has mentioned that. No one's talking about that. The bay is a place where people go into kayaks and paddle boards. And I think that would not be a fair characterization of the conversation.
No, Commissioner, the point was, Commissioner, the point was, I believe, well taken, though. I think that one of the commissioners misunderstood what I said when I said we should merge the rules for the Bay Beach in with the rules of the Ocean Beach. I didn't say that we should make them the same rules. I said we should merge them into that one same document, which is what I did and sent to you all just before the meeting today. But
yeah, and I agree completely with what you're saying. I just wanted to proactively put that out there.
Yeah, we haven't said that. Nobody had said that, and the commissioner might have misunderstood what I said. So he's not saying that either. Nobody has said that yet. Okay. Ms. Hudson, have you warned everybody on the line before they get called on to turn off their background noise and turn off their other connections so that to be in tune with us?
I did earlier, but there is no one waiting for public comment at this time.
There's no one waiting for comments. I'm sorry to hear that, because there were some people that wanted to be on this line. So anyway, we'll continue on with, we are now 2 hours and 48 minutes into, we probably should have stopped at 2:30, 2 hours and a half, and then questioned whether we wanted to go on. But do we want to continue talking about this right now, or do we want to put this off until the next meeting?
I think time for this agenda item, time is of, Commissioner Moskowitz, I think time is of the essence for this agenda items, because the businesses are relying on us to make a decision. I think we need to discuss and potentially vote on this item.
Vote today? I thought you said earlier you were agreeing that we would not vote today.
No, we need to discuss this item today.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Persinger?
I think Commissioner Moskowitz is talking about item number 4, and I think you were talking about item number 3. Is that correct, Commissioner Moskowitz?
Correct. I'm talking about item number 4. We need to talk about.
I think we have to finally dispose of item number 3. So I would move that we table item number 3 at this time.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Our attorney, you look like you had a comment.
No, I was agreeing with Mr. Persinger's comment.
So the motion was to table item number what? Three. Any discussion on that motion? It's properly motioned and second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. Item number 4, discuss and possibly vote to authorize administrative consideration and approval of applications for temporary expansions of premises in accordance with phase 1 of Delaware's economic reopening. Excuse me. I would ask the town attorney to give us a little bit of a definition of what's legislative and what is administrative action, and what we are able to do here and what he would recommend.
Okay. Well, in my view, what must have been intended by the governor, and I believe it's supported by the opinion of other municipal attorneys, is that the rules that generally govern the granting of extensions of premises are zoning rules, and that those rules require public notice, require planning and zoning recommendations and final action on the part of the council. That is not what is intended. I think the prevailing view is that's not what the governor intended with his pronouncement, I think on Wednesday. So the distinction is between a legislative act, which is the act I just described, and an administrative act, which is performed by the administration, performed by town hall under the direction of the town manager. So I don't know if there are any questions, but that's generally what we're referring to, an administrative act within the discretion of town employees under the direction of the town manager versus an act that requires public hearings, notices to the public, and obviously it's a very lengthy process.
I have commissioners lined up, but I want to ask a question here. You feel that the governor intended it to be an administrative process with just following general town rules that would be included, but it would be under administrative process rather than the legislative process.
Right, the town rules, that's a different discussion, but I don't think it's workable. I don't think it makes sense that the granting of a permit to extend your premises, extend your patron area would be done in accordance with a typical zoning application process, which would take a minimum of 30 days and would require you to hear and change, your agendas would be quickly filled up with these applications. So I think by the time you waded through them, with a little luck, with a lot of luck, the state of emergency rules would have been relaxed. And it's not going to help the public if it takes 60, 90, 120 days to get the relief that the restaurants are seeking through a legislative process. So I have discussed this with fellow counsel outside the office and within the office. I can tell you that the city of Rehoboth Beach is adopting, it's very likely this afternoon to adopt the same thing. They're going to get the same advice from their counsel that this is what's envisioned as an administrative process. And then personally, my view is that we just have to be very careful to grant and deny on objective bases as opposed to anything too terribly subjective. We want to give the town manager and his team, or we want to promote the bringing of a good deal of flexibility to them in establishing what rules should apply to each of the restaurants to keep the public safe. But I don't think it's the kind of thing that again, I'm doubling back, that we can bring to the commissioner's attention every meeting 5 or 6 times.
Gotcha. Understand, town attorney. I want to go, before I go to Commissioner Bauer and then Commissioner Moskowitz, I want to go to the town manager and ask specifically what he's requesting under this action. Town manager?
Yes, so I've received one request to endorse an approval for an expansion of premises. I expect to receive more. This letter that they're asking for would get forwarded to the ABCC office to, I think, temporarily amend their license to allow for the expansions. And there's some paperwork that will be filed with the town so that we can review what the expansion is and give them some type of written authorization to proceed. The expansion of premise timeframe that is being talked about is currently June 1 through July 30th, unless it's either shortened or extended by the governor or the ABCC commissioner. So the target timeframe is June 1 through July 30th, unless conditions favor changing those dates. I think I would hope that they don't extend further than that. If they do anything, that they get shorter than that. But those are yet to be determined. So what I'm hopeful to have is a consensus that we should move forward with this and then administratively approve these things in accordance with the governor's guidance and any guidance from the ABCC, with the backstop of they still have to conform with noise requirements, safety requirements for the town, such as maintaining an ADA compliant pathway or sidewalk, and then being conscious of noise ordinance and other things as we potentially approve other applications. But there is not enough time to go through a public hearing process and a public notice process to really do these things if we're really trying to address the flexibility that the restaurants are asking for. And at this point, I've only heard from one. I don't know how many more applications there will be. And I don't know that this is really a feasible thing for all the restaurants to even request.
Thank you, Town Manager. Commissioner Bauer?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret here. Our businesses are hurting tremendously right now. And anything we can do, we need to do it quickly. Because right now they're still under a lot of restrictions, and I don't know what the end date is. I don't know when we're hitting phase 2 or phase 3. I know when phase 1 starts. I don't know when phase 1 ends. So I'd like to see it continue. And I agree with our town solicitor here that, this needs to be an administrative function. This is the time that we can step up and help our businesses out. And I think if we can do it quickly and do it without going through a long drawn out process. If we push this, we kick this can down the road and we vote on it in August or September, that's not helping anybody. So I think we just need to do it the easiest legal way.
Thank you, Commissioner. You finished?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Didn't want to interrupt you again. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, I believe we need to do something today and pass it, but we also need to we need to handle administratively, but also put some requirements to protect the residents who might have to deal with noise issues and make it easier. Like, for example, right now, when we approved Nalu for the outside deck, we told them they need to close at 11. So it would be reasonable to say that expanded space should be closed at 11, and then the people can go inside to the regular space. And then there should be no increase in seating capacity as well, compared to the total license, because the purpose of this is so that the restaurants can survive and they can do social distancing. And just, I believe like we need to add a few requirements just to make it feasible. But I believe we should be able to pass something today.
I actually agree with you. Is there any other commissioner that has a comment on this? Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I agree. This needs to be an administrative decision that's made by the town manager, but we do have to understand, what factors the town manager would consider in approving this. It hopefully won't be just some sort of a rubber stamp approval. I would agree the hours of operation need to be considered. We're talking about expansion of premises outside. I think that we are talking about expansion only for seated dining. I thought I saw that in the governor's order. I can't find that specifically right now, but I think that's the case. The governor also said there has to be some sort of a barrier that indicates or that prevents people from taking drinks off the premises if they have an alcohol license. Again, since these are outdoor facilities, or they would be outdoor facilities, the question of outdoor music is an issue. And I would agree with Commissioner Moskowitz. There should be some understanding about how much expansion is possible. If the restaurants are able to open their existing facility at 30% of capacity, are we allowing them to fill in that additional 70% with some outside facility? That could be a big, expansion of premises. I'm not sure. I'm not thinking of any particular property, but I think those are the kinds of things we need to understand and provide that information to the town manager so that he and his staff can make a decision on these applications.
Thank you, Commissioner Persner. I'm going to go to Commissioner Jazinski and then the town attorney. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry, Ashley we keep hitting the button at the same time, Ashley, thank you. I'll make it real quick. I basically concur with what everyone's saying. We need to let the town manager have the flexibility to do it quickly with no expansion of the total seating that they previously were allowed. It's for seated people only, no additional outside music, and 11 p.m. everybody's got to be out of the newly expanded area, just so we don't create additional problems for the neighbors.
You finished, sir?
That's it.
Town attorney?
Thank you. A number of the points I wanted to make have been brought out in the subsequent comments of the commissioners, but I would say there shouldn't be any link between the total capacity and the outdoor capacity. So the indoor capacity is limited to 30% of the state fire marshal capacity. The expansion of the approval of an expansion of the patron area to the outside premises is going to be with consideration for maintaining social distancing. So I think there's going to need to be some kind of a depiction of the available area and the tables and chairs and the distance that's required between them. So those will be considerations that come up, but that's going to leave you far short in most cases of the total capacity for the restaurant that existed before the state of emergency. So I think that's an irrelevant consideration, the total capacity. Also the governor's press release indicated that applications to expand outdoor seating capacity will be available on Friday, May 22nd. So those of you who recall your stringent English teachers showing you the difference between active and passive language, this is the flaw in usage of passive language. I don't know if this press release is meaning that we're to publish these applications or the governor's office will. There are at least some in the legal community that think the governor's office is going to be sending out something to be incorporated as an application by the town. I'm not convinced that that's what this language means. And that finally, as was pointed out by a number of you, that expansions are to be authorized to begin on June 1. So those are our timeframes, and those are my comments.
I'm going to go to myself, and then I'm going to ask town manager to try to explain that one if he knows, and then I'll go to Commissioner Moskowitz. I have worries about all the issues that everybody has brought up. The very first thing I want to say is we have to do something to help the businesses in this town survive. They're going to help us survive. We're like the old three-legged milking stool. You pull one leg out and the stool falls over. So we all need to cooperate together to make it work. But I'm very worried that the letter they request of us, we need to make sure that we don't give more permission than we understand we're giving. I think the letter ought to address all the town ordinances. I think it should address the amount of square footage that the specific business is going to expand, because there are some businesses that have just limited parking lots and some businesses that have very big parking lots and some businesses that have big decks. So I hope that our letter to the approving, or our letter asking the governor to approve each business, will say what square footage we're talking about. I would hope they're talking about the dates. The town manager has also expressed that, how long it'll last, and the hours of operation, and important around Dewey Beach, the noise ordinance. So I would hope that it still addresses the fact that no outside speakers, or that we would not be agreeing to any outside speakers. So town manager?
I don't have any comments.
You don't have any comments? Commissioner Bauer?
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of allowing expansion of premise is to make people more socially distant, correct? So if we put some restrictions on expanding, essentially we're not expanding, we're expanding for a short period of time. we're not trying to make people get closer to each other. We're trying to make them stay further apart. To me, this is a no-brainer that, this is what we need to do. There's noise ordinances. I get it. These are the laws, right? We're not changing any of that. We're just allowing people, we voted earlier this year to allow expansion of premises. What rules applied to expansion of premises before, they should apply now. Unless we want to sit here and write new rules and get into, June, July, and August of getting around to this thing. So, I'm in favor of just giving our town manager discretion to get this thing done, and let's help our businesses out. We need them.
Thank you, Commissioner. You finished? Commissioner Bauer, are you finished?
I am. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, I would like to motion to authorize administrative consideration and approval of applications for temporary expansion with the following requirements. It should be restaurant property, not public place. There should be some type of barrier, no additional outside music, no increase in original seating capacity, everyone out by 11 p.m. in extended space, and for a period of summer 2020.
The only thing I would say that we don't have the choice in the length of the this. It'll be up to the governor.
But we have a choice in how long we permit it. So, I mean, as soon as the governor stops permitting it, then our thing just falls by the wayside. But the governor could say it's good for a year, and this just lets us evaluate what happens and at the end of the summer, we can do amend or extend.
I'm going to question that, but the town attorney, the town manager, and then the town attorney have comments. Town manager.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that if the governor's order reduced this, so right now, this request that I have is through July 30th. I'm reluctant to say we should say the end of the summer because I don't want to give these businesses something more than the governor is offering, in the sense that I don't think that's necessary right now.
And
so I'm willing to amend to July 30th.
Wait 1 second, please. I'm going to go to the town attorney, but we haven't even gotten a second on this, but I wanted to hear from the town manager and the town attorney first, and then see if we have a second. Town attorney.
I am a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of specifying the length of time that these areas could be utilized. Number one, I don't think the applicants are going to be investing any capital into improvements or anything. This is going to be temporary seating. I don't think they're going to be harmed if we tell them they can do something right away. And then, again, God forbid that the situation takes a turn and the governor says, we have to implement more stringent instead of less stringent social distancing requirements. So I don't think we should tell the business owners that they have any specified period of time that they can do it, just that it's revocable upon the discretion of the town. And then I don't think we need to link the approval to the existing capacity of the restaurant. I mean, if it turns out that a restaurant has a very small inside capacity, but has space available for outside capacity such that they could exceed 30% of their original capacity, I don't know that that should be a problem.
Thank you.
So
thank you. No, I'm going to interrupt for a second. I'm going to ask, is there a second for the motion?
Second.
There's a second by.
But I'd like to amend that motion though, without the restrictions of.
Okay, I had hands up before you, sir. So you can second, but with Commissioner Persinger, then Commissioner Moskowitz, then Commissioner Bauer. Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, I would like to change a little of the language there. There was reference to a barrier. Barrier specific to preventing patrons from carrying drinks off premises. So I think it should be specific there. In terms of a time period, I think we would be authorizing this, I think, for the period that the governor has authorized such expansion of premises, and leave it at that. And then there's one other factor that I would add, and that is some assessment of any risks to public safety. I'm thinking about if there's some expansion along Route 1, the potential for, keeping patrons and traffic separated. I know that Rehoboth talked about this a little bit, even the potential of having a Jersey wall in between the seated dining area and the traffic. It may not be a problem in Dewey. I'm not thinking about any specific property, but I just think in terms of the town manager's review of any given application, that interaction between seated dining and traffic needs to be considered, just to make sure that that's not going to be a problem.
Commissioner Moskowitz, before I get to you, you had indicated you might be willing to modify your motion. Could I hear from, if you don't mind, please? I'd like to hear from Commissioner Bauer had a suggestion for a modification that you might think of or not think of before you modify. Commissioner Bauer.
I'm very willing to modify.
If we can just modify this. I mean, putting any restrictions is making it anti-business, and we're trying to help the businesses. So if you know anything about the restaurant and bar business and the reason that people come on vacations, a lot of people go out after 11 o'clock. So if you're going to cut off the last 2 hours of their business, you're hurting them. I mean, just understand what you're saying when you say 11 o'clock. Between 11 and 1 that's a lot of revenue for somebody who's trying to catch up missing St. Patrick's Day, Memorial Day. We're not even going to have a running of the bull this year, for example. I mean, come on, we got to help these businesses out. Let's not put any more restrictions on it. Let's let them expand their premises if possible. And like Fred was saying, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Fred. I mean, let's, if that's what the law is, let's just go with it. So if you could amend it to, allow expansion of premises under the town manager's discretion.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Well, would I be able to hear from the other commissioners? So when I do, I'll restate it with a final.
Or you can drop your motion and make a new motion, either way.
So I have one question for the solicitor. Is when I said no increase in original seating capacity, what was intended is if a restaurant right now has room for, like, let's say 30 seats, we want to give them those 30 seats spread out. I understand the governor's order limits their capacity to, what is it, 30%, which would be 9, but that wasn't my intent. My intent was the original capacity is 30. We should expand the outdoor premise so they can have up to 30, but not to get more than 30. Like, we don't want to give them like 60 per se, but we want to try to be fair to them. So is there a better way to state that?
Well, no, I think that if the intent of the group is to say that you can't have more patrons than originally granted based on your state fire marshal assessment of your square footage inside, then you've said it correctly. I'm not sure what the link is between the inside capacity per the state fire marshal and placing a limitation on the outside area of that type, but that's within your discretion, not mine. I do think, though, I think you can expect the town manager is going to be imposing social distancing requirements in the approvals, so that even a large area is not going to be able to accommodate nearly as many people as that expanded patron area would under normal circumstances.
County Attorney, can I interrupt you for a minute, please?
Yes.
If I understand the governor's directive, or the proposed directive would be for seated dining only, and they would also have to have it well delineated by not a wall, but some sort of barrier. The governor's directive had that in it.
Yes, there's a barrier.
And it was, like I say, for seated dining only, I believe. Is that correct?
I'm not certain of that. I'm reading right now. I mean, once again, there's a reference to this application to expand. And maybe we'll get some more direction from the governor's office today that could be incorporated into the town manager's process.
I apologize. I interrupted you, but I'm almost positive I read it was for seated dining. But
I believe you're right. I don't see it in this press release, but that seems to be the case.
Commissioner Moskowitz, did you want to rephrase your motion or drop your motion and have
No,
another?
I'm happy to rephrase it. Would you just be able to ask the other two commissioners, so this way I'll rephrase it once that would satisfy the 5? And
Commissioner Jazinski, you raised your hand for.
Yeah, I think the 11 o'clock is important to put in there. We're not closing the businesses down at 11. We're just closing down the additional outside area. You know, in some cases, the property of the outside area that they could use kind of gets into neighborhoods a bit more and gets into more neighbors a bit more. And we just don't want to create another huge problem. And certainly the total seating capacity, I think, is completely reasonable as well. The only thing I'll say is I don't think we need to put in what we say anything that's already required by the governor's order. So if he requires a barrier, we don't have to stay that.
That's right.
You know, but I do think some of these things are reasonable. We want to be very pro-business and help these guys go, but we don't want to make it that the neighbors are really feel like, hey, I'm really being put upon with a new outside party at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Commissioner Bauer?
No more comments.
Okay. Anybody else have any? Oh, Commissioner Persinger, excuse me.
Yeah, with respect to the 11 p.m. time, we already have some outdoor service areas for which their approval, their conditional use approval requires them to close by 11 p.m. to have patrons leave by 11 p.m. If we were to allow other restaurants to expand their premises and stay open after 11 p.m., wouldn't we have to also do that for those other existing outside service areas that are already restricted to 11 p.m.? That's, I guess, probably a question to the town solicitor.
That's the first thing they will ask. I will put it that way. Go ahead, town solicitor.
Well, that Mr. Persinger is making an important comment. I think that the key for us is that we're treating everyone fairly, and there are no winners and losers in this process. So I would think that we would enforce the rules equally against any existing business as compared to one that is getting relief, so that we either should be relaxing the hours of operation for currently authorized outside premises or imposing an 11 o'clock restriction on these new patron area expansions, so that we're consistent.
Any other comments from anybody else? Commissioner Moskowitz, you now have a choice. You've heard what you wanted to hear, so go ahead.
yeah,
And make.
I'll restate the motion. And right now, like, for whatever reason, everything's closing at 8 p.m. So I've never seen the ice cream shop stay open longer than Starboard, but it's surreal. But I would like to restate the motion to authorize administrative consideration and approval of application for temporary expansion of restaurants for a period of when the government has authorized expansion, with the following conditions. It should be on restaurant property, not public place. No additional outside music, no increase in original seating capacity, and everyone out by 11 p.m. in extended space.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Jazinski. Is there any discussion? Anybody? Commissioner Bauer?
Yeah, so the 11 o'clock, who's going to enforce it?
Just like we would enforce anybody else.
Is that going to be our police enforcing that, or the ABC?
If our police would enforce a curfew, 11 o'clock time deadline for closing with anybody else, they would enforce it just like they would for the decks or anybody else.
All right. I mean, I would prefer to not put that restriction in there, but we'll see how the vote goes.
And
I'd like
we
to
can
amend the
always
motion to not put 11 o'clock, but You're just hurting the businesses more. That's all I'm saying. If the intent is to make people socially distant, then we should be allowing people to be socially distant after 11 o'clock.
I think I'm gonna say again that I believe the expansion was intended by the governor for seated dining.
And that's the only thing we have right now. Phase one may last all summer. I don't know.
You keep saying social distancing and that would affect the numbers of people. Social distancing would only affect the number of people for seated dining is what the governor is saying.
Right. And the only bar and restaurant we can do right now, there is 0 bar service. You have to be seated.
Say that one. Yes, I understand.
You have to be seated. So you're trying to say both things here, Mr. Mayor. I mean, yeah, you're correct in half of what you're saying, but you can't at 11 o'clock, you still have to be seated. You still have to be seated at a chair. You know, if you're going to restrict them to 30%, but they got an empty parking lot, I'd rather people not park their cars in the parking lot. I mean, go buy a parking pass from us. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Giving away free parking right now. We're looking for money. Like, go buy a parking pass, park on the street.
Attorney, did you have a comment on that?
I did. You had asked me earlier to confirm your impression that it was seated dining only, and you are right. It is, the expansion of premises is for seated dining.
So
right.
The only thing that would restrict it would be the square footage that the governor allows for, and if we were to say the same amount of people that's normally allowed in the restaurant.
We're trying to get them some capacity back.
Right.
Until
And
whatever
actually,
their operational hours are.
Correct.
yes,
Exactly.
and if I could correct myself, it's not seated dining, it's seated capacity, which I think is what Mr. Bauer is saying.
Okay. So town manager.
I think that this is a big deal to the restaurants and they're just going to be generally appreciative. So if we could start with 11 and then if we have to amend later, that I think that could be something that's considered at a later date. But I've got to get stuff signed and into the ABCC office today if I can. So I'd like to.
So you're telling us to shut up and move on?
I would request that you guys stick with 11 o'clock for now. And if we have to come back and ask for something in addition to that, we can do that on behalf of the restaurant.
Okay, I'll then I guess I can call the question. Oh, Mr. Pershner had his hand up first, and it'll be the last comment we made.
And just very quickly, I tend to agree with the town manager. I think this has come up very suddenly. We do have to help the businesses. We have to open up opportunities for them. But I think the best choice at the moment, with the very little input that we've had, both from the business side as well as from the property owner's side, is to stick with the existing rule of 11 p.m. As the town manager said, we can come back and revisit this if necessary.
Well, I'll make the final statement then. I would hope that we would pass this. I think the businesses need it. I think we need to get it done and we can change it later if necessary. So call the question. All in favor, say aye. By name, Commissioner Jazinski.
Dave Jazinski, yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Commissioner Moskowitz, yes.
Commissioner Persinger.
Commissioner Persinger votes yes.
Commissioner Bauer.
Commissioner Bauer votes yes.
And Commissioner Mayor Cook also votes yes. It's unanimous. So that's the final item on the agenda, except town manager's comments.
My only comment is I'd like to keep all future meetings to 2 hours to save on attorney fees. Thank you.
One person in public comment for that item.
Ah, very good. That was just, there was nobody on the line, you say, or we missed it? Oh, then let's have one person give us let's have it. We said there was going to be public comment. They waited long enough. Thank you for being there. Are they still there, Ashley?
It says joining. It's just taking a moment.
I apologize to whoever did it. Kelly Ranieri, I completely apologize. I called for a vote before before you even got on, and I should not have done that. So there you are. Go right ahead. And we'll wait because she's probably listening to it.
Kelly, are you there?
We'll wait for a little bit. It's not that long. I know you're all anxious to get out of here, but
She just texted and said since you voted yes, she has no comment.
oh, and tell her I apologize. So thank you. Next item is, I said town manager's comment. Did you have a comment, town manager?
No, just my prior comment stands.
No, thank you very much. Commissioner's comments, Commissioner Bauer.
No comments at this time. We've gone long enough. Trying to save on legal fees right now.
Commissioner Jasinski.
Just keep it real short. I'm glad to be part of the team here. So thank you all. In the last, I guess, couple day or two, we've gotten, some public input, a flurry with the gradual reopening and the rules kind of changing. I think some people, may have a desire to kind of get out there and have a lot of fun, and we want them to, but it's just important that the public stick to the rules that we're allowed, because the moving on to the phases where we can get fully open is dependent on our government seeing that we're kind of adhering to what they're asking us to do right now. That's my only feedback.
Okay, Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yeah, it's just very surreal to see the ice cream store be one of the latest businesses in the town. And I mean, I see the businesses hurting very badly now. And I think the governor, whatever he does, he needs to put it out. What date short-term rentals and hotels can reopen? You have hotels that need to properly plan. You need to have people who do rentals, short-term rentals. They need to plan. The businesses in our town need to plan appropriately how they staff their restaurants. So, I mean, whatever the governor is doing, and I would hope maybe after Memorial Day, he relaxes restrictions, because after Memorial Day to July 1st have technically been a much lower demand of use. He begin to relax it and let people know in advance so you can plan.
Thank you, Mr. Moskowitz. Appreciate it. Have I forgotten anybody except myself? Excuse me? Well, then I want to make a comment.
You didn't let me make a comment.
I thought I forgot you, Commissioner.
You did.
I apologize.
I will just echo Commissioner Jasinski's comments. We want the beaches open. We want the businesses open. And we just hope that people do everything they can to comply with the rules and to keep things open and make them even more open.
I want to say that I believe the governor and our representatives and our senators are trying to do what's right for the state of Delaware. It really causes a great deal of confusion and problems for the town, but they're trying to protect the citizens overall and our visitors. I would like the town manager just to comment very quickly if you can. If you can't, just say you can't, but tell people, if I call in and complain to you about somebody that's running and shouldn't be running, or somebody that's in town and shouldn't be in town, what is the process?
So there is an email address that we're supposed to forward complaints to. And give me 1 second so I can find it, so I make sure I convey it correctly.
While he's doing that, I just want people to understand that the town is in a tough position. That if we get complaints, we have to address those complaints. But basically, we take that information and forward it to the Attorney General's office. And they handle it from there. So the town manager, if you go ahead and explain.
Right. So complaints regarding the recreational and leisure rental issue can be forwarded to covid.doj@delaware.gov. And what that does is it initiates a process whereby the Department of Justice will review the inquiry, and then they will reach out to local law enforcement and decide whether it needs to be followed up upon and at what, when it needs to be followed up upon. This is really a very difficult area for us to be trying to, I guess, enforce, in the sense that there are people who are letting others use their property that are family members. There are people that are under the governor's orders allowed to secure housing for work. There's a lot of different twists to it, but leisure and vacation rentals of property is not allowed at this time. So the Department of Justice has indicated that they will assist in evaluating the complaints, but these complaints are not easy to resolve and follow up on. So, who is the person that's penalized? If people are renting their properties, I think the property owners have some responsibility in this. So there may be additional follow-up with property owners if we get complaints. But it's not an easy issue for us to resolve. And it's not an issue that is going to resolve in 20 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. In some cases, it may take several days for us to resolve the issue or even get support to follow up on it. So we're not ignoring the complaints, but there is an administrative process that will have to be followed to fairly evaluate them.
Thank you, Town Manager. I would agree with everybody else. Please, everybody, as much as you can, follow the governor's orders. It won't be long. We'll be through this. We'll work it out together. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Motion second by Commissioner Persinger. Motion by Commissioner Bauer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Unanimous.